Chapter 221, Epilogue, Leap, and the Second Self-Created Charm. Exactly 1 week later, in the Guan House common room, an unusual tension hung in the air. They had finished their last class today, and that meant only one thing. Finals week was approaching. Tomorrow, Hogwarts would post the detailed exam schedule. The thought of exams made even the usually relaxed students nervous. Even a veteran like Cedric felt his heart quicken. The reason was simple. This year, Guan House had already won the Quidditch Cup, but the House Cup still eluded them. Typically, professors tallied the first year's final exam scores by house, and the house that ranked first overall received an extra 50 points for the House Cup. Guan House already had a healthy lead, but those 50 points would make the victory unassailable. The first years this year were scoring much better than Cedric's year had, and even Ravenclaw, long dominant in exams, was being unexpectedly suppressed. If there was a chance to take the top overall evaluation, why not seize it? When the students saw someone in the corner of the common room, their anxieties eased. Their gazes softened into something like admiration. It was Ciel. For a week, except for necessary classes, he hadn't left the common room. Anyone who entered could see him practicing the most basic charms over and over. Lumos had been cast so many times, its faint glow was indistinguishable from the wallpaper. Probably hundreds of thousands of times. His dedication inspired the rest of the house. Guan House students, who never lacked diligence, couldn't stand idly by while their comrade trained day in and day out for the house's honor. Over the week, they voluntarily doubled their practice. Many stayed up late into the night. The supply of late-night snacks in the small kitchen tripled. Cedric broke the silence. "All right, don't be too nervous, everyone. At this rate, we have a very good chance to get the top overall evaluation." His words had the opposite effect he'd intended. The common room grew suddenly serious. No one wanted to pull the team down. Without being told twice, the students returned to their practice. The older students patiently coached the younger ones, and everyone tacitly avoided the corner where Ciel trained, not wanting to disturb him. One by one, they yawned, and unable to stay awake, trudged back to their dormitories. Hannah quietly brought a cup of hot black tea and a few plates of pastries and set them on the table in front of Ciel. Then she clutched her wand and, in another corner, flipped through a wrinkled textbook. She fell asleep with her head resting on the pages. A moment later, Ciel gave his wand a gentle flick. A blanket wrapped around Hannah, and she slept on undisturbed. Ciel sighed softly. "Tomorrow exam week begins," he said to himself. "Which means our first year is really coming to an end." He thought of Quirrell. What exactly was Quirrell planning? Over the past week, Quirrell had not seemed interested in clearing the challenges in the fourth-floor corridor. Instead, he'd spent his time giving interviews to the Daily Prophet and other magical outlets, telling touching stories about capturing the man-eating monster. The ministry had lavished medals on him. Fudge himself had visited twice, publicly enthusiastic. Quirrell's actions had probably saved Fudge's political career, and the minister eagerly clung to the hero who could restore public confidence. Quirrell's prestige in the magical world had peaked. Many hailed him as a noble, upright hero. Ciel knew better. Lord Voldemort's goal had always been the Philosopher's Stone. How Quirrell's recent activities helped him get the stone was unclear. Ciel couldn't guess his intentions, and he decided not to waste time worrying about them. The best response was to improve himself. He glanced at the system panel and felt a small thrill of satisfaction. The past week had changed a lot. The charms that had seemed unstable a week ago had been honed by near-continuous practice. The shallow sheen on them had worn away, leaving a denser, almost solid luster. The long-stalled accumulation that had trapped Ciel in a bottleneck had been digested over the week. Brilliant platinum-grade lights rose and fell on the panel, far more dazzling than before. Even if they hadn't reached diamond grade, the differences within platinum were huge. In terms of magical attainment, Ciel had leapt. Scattered diamond lights also shimmered, though not from Serpensortia, which had briefly reached diamond under the blessing of dozens of cursed jewels, but from his week of diligent practice. Lumos, the charm he'd drilled into muscle memory, had reached a critical brink. Within the platinum glow there were fragments of diamond-like sparkle. It had almost, but not yet quite, become diamond grade. It wasn't for nothing that I focused on Lumos this week, Ciel murmured. There's a payoff. He thought with satisfaction about how few wizards would bother to practice Lumos to his current extent. It was a common charm. People taught students to light a wand and move on. But Lumos had helped Ciel understand microscopic magical particles, and by studying the interactions of Lumos's particles, he'd analogized the principles of other charms. One idea he'd been working on was making the particles that constitute Lumos vibrate at a single frequency, something like the laser principle he'd known in his previous life. He had tried it before. The light became exceptionally bright, and its tremor against dark creatures was amplified. But his magic perception had been too low to reach the level he'd envisioned. Now, as he watched the line on the system panel, the frequency light spell derived from Lumos had almost formed. A platinum and diamond shimmer of text was taking shape. Ciel tapped his wand and spoke the charm he'd crafted from Lumos. Lumos, Ashes. A nearly incandescent white beam erupted from his wand, far brighter than ordinary Lumos, intense enough to sting the eyes. He gently flicked, and the beam swept across the corner of the long table. A smooth incision sliced through the thick wood as if it were paper. The cut still radiated astonishing heat. Ciel stroked the warm edge and studied the system panel. He had completed the charm during the week, but something felt missing. The panel confirmed it. The new charm could be used, but its description lingered a hair's breadth away from completion. What else is missing? He wondered. He'd been puzzling over the question for 2 days. If he couldn't think of it now, he wouldn't force it. In terms of magical power, he wasn't lacking. A laser-like cutting charm existed for lethality, but Sectum Sempra at platinum grade was far more lethal, and Serpensortia at diamond grade was even deadlier. Perhaps the rest would come with time. Ciel turned to occlumency. Over the week, the voodoo doll curse's intensity had been steadily increasing. Progress from gold to platinum had been slow and slower as it climbed, but his occlumency growth had remained steady. The platinum light now nearly filled the text, only the tiniest sliver remained. Ciel's eyes shone with anticipation. Occlumency had brought him immense benefit. If it reached full platinum, his advantage would grow enormously. He had a feeling something important would happen. He reached into his robe and took out the voodoo doll. Its face looked utterly despairing. 7 days, an entire week without rest. Even a cursed object felt it had been treated inhumanely. Its eyes blazed with fear as it glared at Ciel. You should be hanged from the Hogwarts Tower or locked in Azkaban, it wanted to say. Ciel merely smiled. Don't look at me like that, he said. I know you worked hard this week, but you haven't worked in vain. Your effort converted into my improvement. You're not an ordinary voodoo doll. You're a meritorious voodoo doll. I'm always fair. The doll's expression flickered with cautious hope. Let me think. How about I give you a vacation? At the word vacation, the voodoo doll's despair turned to bright-eyed glee. All it wanted was a break. It would do anything for a vacation, even run far away from Ciel and never be exploited again. Are you really going to give me a vacation? The doll asked in trembling voices. Ciel chuckled. I'm not a monster. I wouldn't make you work forever without a rest. A vacation is definitely happening. Relief washed over the doll's face. Then let me go now. I want my vacation. Ciel shook his head. Not now. What? Why? The doll demanded. There's one last important task you must finish, Ciel said. If you leave now, what about the task? Then what about my vacation? Didn't you promise? His lips curved. Don't rush. Have you ever heard of compensatory leave? The moment the doll understood what that meant, its threads snapped with rage and it erupted in curses far more violent than before. Compensatory leave? Compensatory my. Which dark wizard invented such a thing to toy with people? I curse him to death. As the doll's curse surged into its spirit, Ciel inhaled deeply. On the system panel, the last golden sliver on the occlumency text winked out. All the text was bathed in platinum light. Occlumency, platinum grade, promoted. At the same moment, a sudden, intense sourness slammed into Ciel's brow, as if 1,000 lemons had been stuffed into his head. A throbbing pain followed. Tears sprang unbidden to his eyes, and his vision blurred. Caught off guard, he clenched his teeth and endured. After a long moment, the sourness and throbbing subsided. Shiar wiped his tears and let his vision refocus. He had expected change with the promotion, but not anything so intense. I just don't know what qualitative changes this will bring, he whispered, eyes alight. He looked back at the system panel. Below the occlumency text, a new line had appeared. Sixth Sense Enhanced Grow, Chapter 222, Third Eye, Derailment, Harvest. When new lines of text flashed across his system panel, Char's eyes widened in surprise. Occlumency had just advanced to Platinum grade, and it had unlocked a new ability, a gold grade boost to his sixth sense. He felt a strange mix of excitement and wariness. He rubbed his forehead. It had been sore and splitting only moments ago. Ever since the upgrade, he'd had the sensation that a new eye had opened in the center of his brow. Touching the spot or looking in a mirror showed nothing unusual, but the feeling persisted. Maybe it was connected to the sixth sense enhancement on the system panel. Char stopped speculating and decided to test it. He entered occlumency. At Platinum grade, the mind control skill felt far deeper. Every fragment of his mental energy obeyed him. Depths of psychic power he had never reached before rose to the surface. His thoughts sharpened and his mind cleared. Most strikingly, when he focused inward, he felt his mental energy condense into a single mental eye in the center of his forehead. The instant he concentrated on it, the world dimmed. The material world vanished, replaced by a strange realm of countless intricate lines and shifting colors. A peculiar, indescribable sensation stirred in him. Then, suddenly, Char remembered descriptions he'd read in the original novel back in his previous life. Professor Trelawney and her divination class. Students had mocked her divination lessons, unable to glean anything useful from tea leaves and portentous signs. Even Hermione, usually respectful of her professors, had left angry. Trelawney would just tell her she lacked talent. During Umbridge's reign, she'd been mocked further, asked to prove her supposed third eye, and unable to do so. Most people thought her a fraud, yet the prophecies she delivered, whether through tea leaves, tarot, or strange trance speech, always proved true. She had been a real seer. Char stared thoughtfully. Trelawney said she had a third eye, he murmured. With it she could see a world ordinary people can't, even glimpses of fate. Is her third eye a mental eye like this? But doubts came quickly. He could see lines and colors, but they meant nothing to him. He couldn't translate them into clear predictions about major events in the magical world like Trelawney did. Wizards with more advanced occlumency, Dumbledore, Lord Voldemort, Snape, must have far stronger sixth senses and clearer mental eyes than his. And still, none of them had been shown to glimpse fate. How had Trelawney done it? In the original, she'd seemed ignorant of occlumency entirely. Since he couldn't figure it out, Char let the matter go. Whatever it was, an enhanced sixth sense would be useful. It might warn him of certain dangers ahead. He also noticed that on his system panel, Demeter ritual magic was glowing far brighter than before. It said that in the Age of Olympus, gods demanded extremely perceptive priests, Char mused. Priests needed to be able to receive divine messages. In other words, they needed a terribly strong sixth sense. If my sixth sense improved, I'd come closer to those standards. No wonder Demeter ritual magic improved. It's tied to worshipping the goddess of fertility. That pleased him. The last upgrade to Demeter had given him the ability to bless seeds with a silver cup, saving him countless hours and raising seed quality. If Demeter advanced another level, there might be something even better. All things considered, even ignoring the mysterious mental eye, the occlumency upgrade had been a huge gain. He smiled briefly. Pain stabbed across his forehead. The smile froze. He hadn't expected any immediate reaction. He just opened the mental eye and now something was responding? He opened the mental eye again. The strange mesh of lines and colors returned, but when he looked up above Hogwarts, he saw something new. A vast tangle of dense black lines spread across the sky, blotches of murky, roiling color like a thick, dark cloud. A dull ache throbbed in his brow. He yanked his focus away. The earlier satisfaction vanished, replaced by confusion and alarm. What on earth is that? What happened? Is it Quirrell? What did he do? By then, a full day had passed. The first years had no more classes. The rest of their time would be spent preparing for finals. That meant today the exam schedule would be posted. Char saw the Hufflepuff common room door open and Professor Sprout enter, her face ashen. She pinned the exam timetable in the most conspicuous spot. Char read it easily. Charms, history of magic, transfiguration, and flying all had times, rooms, and notes. But when he scanned the board, he noticed a conspicuous omission. There was no defense against the dark arts exam listed. "Auntie," he asked, "where's the defense against the dark arts exam? Why isn't it on the schedule?" Professor Sprout's expression darkened further. She answered through gritted teeth, "This year's defense assessment is different from previous years. All of the first years must enter the Forbidden Forest for practical combat." Char, though braced for strangeness from Quirrell, couldn't hide his shock. First years into the Forbidden Forest for the exam? Had they lost their minds? He could go into the forest. His strength and vitality made it safe for him. But the other students were fragile. Even an experienced professor like Snape almost died once against a werewolf. The Forbidden Forest wasn't overflowing with werewolves, but it was dangerous. Acromantulas alone could devour a whole house's first years. Sending first years into the Forbidden Forest for finals bordered on insanity. How could they arrange such a thing? Char demanded. Professor Sprout took a deep breath. Quirrell's reputation has soared this past week. He's gotten uncomfortably close to Minister Fudge. The whole magical world's press has been building up his image. Quirrell asked a question. The creature responsible for the recent disappearances wasn't that powerful, so why has no one been able to deal with it? He argued that Britain's defense education is inadequate. From the start, children aren't taught to face darkness and danger. So he proposed to create a supposedly safe training area on the edge of the Forbidden Forest, where there would be no fatal threats, so children from first year on would truly learn how to fight and not be helpless when real dangers like those disappearances appear. Char's disbelief deepened. Dumbledore didn't object? Professor Sprout's face twisted with anger and bitterness. The ministry approved Quirrell's proposal. The school board agreed. A survey of students' parents showed most supported it. Quirrell's momentum frightened everyone. After the disappearances, they all felt it necessary to teach self-defense. Quirrell even got Harry Potter's signed consent. With all parties on board, what could Dumbledore do, even as headmaster? Char's mind raced. The situation made sense now. Dumbledore had tried to use Quirrell as a test, a whetstone, by setting up the Philosopher's Stone challenge to gauge Voldemort's recovery and temper Harry. Quirrell, by building public momentum and winning Harry's trust, had seized the initiative. On exam day, he could use the Forbidden Forest to trap Dumbledore and the other professors, then slip into the challenge to seize the Philosopher's Stone. Dumbledore would be forced to choose: protect the stone and risk the students, or protect the students and risk the stone. Quirrell had overplayed his hand, but with the public and the ministry behind him, he had a home field advantage. Char exhaled softly and shook his head. He never would have guessed it would play out this way as the year closed. But once he recovered from the shock, his eyes lit up. Whether Voldemort got the stone or not didn't matter much to him. If the sky fell, Dumbledore would hold it up. This mess had started because Dumbledore deliberately left Quirrell alone to be tested. How it resolved was Dumbledore's problem. Dumbledore still had the Elder Wand and had not yet been stricken by the fatal curse from the Resurrection Stone ring. Even if Voldemort regained a physical body, he wouldn't be able to do much in Dumbledore's presence. Besides, the Philosopher's Stone wasn't an instant-use device. Making a body would take procedures and time. And this was Hogwarts, Dumbledore's stronghold. If Voldemort could simply abscond with the stone from here, Dumbledore might as well be a block of tofu. More importantly, Char had found an angle that favored him. If Quirrell intended to use the Forbidden Forest to trap Dumbledore, then Quirrell would be pouring his efforts into preparing the forest and ensuring no students were harmed before exam day. If any child were seriously injured, Dumbledore could immediately veto the plan and ruin everything Quirrell had worked for. That meant Quirrell couldn't afford to make a move against Char right now. As long as Char stayed out of the Forbidden Forest and avoided Quirrell's traps, he had a relatively safe window. There was only a week until the defense exam. For ordinary students, or even talented ones like Harry, a week wasn't long enough to learn powerful new spells or make major improvements. For Char, a week could be decisive. He checked the system clock and grinned. The timing is almost perfect. The pute fruit on Sprout Island should be ripe. On his system panel, Legendary Life had already completed one sublimation, but Legendary Power remained stuck at the same node. This might be his chance. If Legendary Power could undergo another sublimation, whatever lurked in the Forbidden Forest would tremble before his unmatched might. Char took out the portkey. The world spun, and he arrived on Sprout Island. A vast sea of reward light spheres shimmered across the island. Patches of pute fruit were ready for harvest. He inhaled deeply and reached out. Instantly, the spheres, like waves of light, engulfed him. Chapter 223. Power transforms again. Further sublimation. Indomitable strength. On Sprout Island, countless orbs of light surged like a tidal wave toward Zar. The system panel rattled with notifications. You have cultivated the pute fruit to maturity. You have received a reward, stamina enhancement, iron grade. A waterfall of messages cascaded across the screen, and dazzling light poured from the panel. The stamina enhancement entry flashed, climbing quickly from iron to bronze to silver, and in an instant it shone with a golden glow. Judging by the momentum, advancing to platinum would be easy, and diamond might even be within reach. But Zar barely glanced at stamina enhancement. His attention locked on two other entries, Legendary Life and Legendary Power. After the stamina enhancement reward appeared, both legendary abilities reacted, their auras intensified. Joy flared in Zar's chest. This meant one thing. Stamina enhancement was another piece of the puzzle that would push Legendary Life and Legendary Power toward mythical rank. Legendary Life had already undergone one sublimation, so although it was still far from mythical, it had taken a qualitative leap. Bonuses that aimed at it would be less effective than before, and the light on it brightened only a little. Legendary Power, however, had never been sublimated. Its glow surged with unusual intensity until it hit a bottleneck. No matter how much stamina enhancement's luster piled on, Legendary Power's glow stalled. That only made Zar smile more broadly. He had seen this before with Legendary Life. When the light paused, it meant the ability was at the threshold of sublimation, gathering energy for a transformation. Zar watched the system panel intently. The stamina enhancement ability had already reached platinum as the reward orbs poured in. Even though the effectiveness of the lower-grade reward orbs had begun to wane, many still rushed into Zar. The platinum sheen thickened until facets of diamond-like brilliance appeared, bit by bit. Zar drew a deep breath. He felt life-level changes stir in his limbs, bones, and flesh. His breathing lengthened, blood surged with each inhale, and his sturdy body felt tireless. New tissue seemed to grow between muscle and bone, carpeting his flesh and continuously supplying energy. It was as if he could now unleash his peak strength without the previous drop-off after a single burst. His strength ceiling had nudged upward. Even so, Zar's expression showed impatience. The last reward orb from the pute fruit had entered him. The diamond glitter on stamina enhancement flickered slightly higher, but the iron-grade orbs were simply too weak to push stamina enhancement all the way to diamond. Legendary Power remained in the transformation phase. Stamina enhancement kept helping, but it still wasn't enough to complete the sublimation. Zar let out a coarse breath and clenched his fists. Each sublimation of a legendary ability brought changes far greater than ordinary level-ups. Legendary Life sublimation had directly upgraded his survival ability, a blessing beyond measure, but Legendary Life mainly preserved him. Legendary Power would become his ultimate combat trump card. Among Zar's current combat talents, it was the closest to the levels of Dumbledore, Voldemort, and Grindelwald. If Legendary Power could complete its sublimation, it might let him match those top wizards and even change the tide in a crucial moment. Now there remained an apparently insurmountable gap. Zar grit his teeth, remembering the last time Legendary Life had sublimated. He had tempered himself in the giant priest Sirius's ancient fire magic. Extreme forging had given a decisive push. To force Legendary Power over the final hurdle would likewise require immense pressure. Zar's thoughts raced. There were few beings who could truly put pressure on him by strength. Giant priest Sirius barely counted, and he was too old and frail. Zar wanted Sirius around for other reasons, so he couldn't exploit him too fiercely. The only being left who might temper him sufficiently was the Kraken. In terms of raw might, the North Sea Kraken was the strongest creature Zar had ever encountered. Even now, in a real arm wrestle, the Kraken would outmatch him. With that in mind, Zar dove into the sea and headed to a trench near Sprout Island. Eyes lit in the fog, the Kraken woke and recoiled at Zar's intent. "Little wizard," a cavernous voice rumbled. "You want to arm wrestle me again?" The Kraken grunted, not surprised. Zar's body was not something that belonged to this era. It bore Titan giant blood, and the giant priest he had brought back confirmed that. Titan giants were warlike. A descendant would be restless. For the Kraken, the contest would be a way to stretch and amuse itself. In the modern magical world, even dragons were easy prey for the Kraken. Making it exert itself was a rarity. The Kraken began to surface to arm wrestle as before. But Zar's next request made it narrow its many eyes. "You mean," it said slowly, "you want to arm wrestle me in the sea? Do you think the strength you felt on shore and reefs was my full power?" The Kraken went on. "Only in the deep sea, surrounded by pressure, does my true might flow. The power you faced before was less than 30% of my full strength." Zar felt the stalled transformation within him stir again. The more pressure, the greater the impetus. He understood now what the path from legendary to mythical demanded: unbearable trials, suffering and tempering, like Heracles' 12 labors that forged the god of strength, or the hideous soul-splitting Voldemort endured for power. Even geniuses like Dumbledore and Grindelwald had paid terrible costs. The road to mythical was paved with thorns. No sublimation could be completed without monstrous tempering. His eyes went cold. "Come." The Kraken wasted no more words. In the pitch-black abyss, it stirred a monstrous undercurrent and slammed a colossal tentacle toward Zar. Before it even reached him, Zar felt the oppressive force. The Kraken hadn't lied. In the deep sea, unleashing its full power, it truly was an ancient top predator. The force it brought was more than double what Zar had felt at the shore. Zar's eyes burned. Water enhancement triggered. His domain was the water now. Currents swirled to assist him. He drew a deep breath and punched, a blow surpassing his previous peak. Cracks rang out. Flesh burst on his arm, bones webbed with hairline fractures under the impact. He tasted metal. His internal organs shuddered. That had not fully stopped the Kraken's tentacle, but Zar seemed not to notice the pain. He punched again, and again. With each strike, the stamina enhancement icon flickered on the system panel. He held peak force without decline. The previously stalled transformation of legendary power reignited, burning like a blast furnace under pain and pressure. After more than a dozen blows, Zar forced the Kraken's strike aside. His arms were gruesome, exposed bone here and there, as if a tattered doll had been ripped open, but he had contained that tentacle. The Kraken was surprised. Earlier it had been sure Zar couldn't have taken that attack. It had assumed Zar would be smashed. This was only one tentacle, however. The Kraken had many. "You see the difference?" the Kraken rumbled. "On land, I can play with you, but in the sea, in strength contests, you don't stand a chance. Titan giant bloodlines are rare. In the Olympus era, Titan giants interbred with many species. Most ocean-blooded Titan lineages have died out. We North Sea Kraken are an exception. I still carry a faint Titan giant bloodline. To truly contend with me, you'd have to be grown and have your bloodline fully unleash." Zar interrupted with a blazing gaze. "Kraken," he said, "you're talkative today. Have you forgotten when I chased you and you fled with so many tentacles broken? I'm giving you a chance to vent, and you're still whimpering. No wonder Madam Hufflepuff almost caught you and nearly raised you as food for Hogwarts." The Kraken's sore spot was struck. A low, furious roar rolled up from the deep. "Little wizard," it muttered, "I'm really angry now. You brought this on yourself." Another tentacle lashed at Zar with the fury of surging undercurrents. Zar braced and resisted with everything he had. Like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, he met the irresistible force. Flesh and blood sprayed, bones splintered. The blow slammed him into the seabed, crashing him onto rock. When he finally pushed the tentacle away with enormous effort, more tentacles arrived, battering the seabed in a rhythm that shook the ocean bottom. Trolls and Eugene on Sprout Island felt the vibrations and grew uneasy. The waves at the surface roiled with new violence. None of them, however, could enter the deep sea. Giant priest Sirius stood with his staff, silently praying. Over the past months, he had grown convinced that Zar was the prophesied being who would lead the trolls back to greatness. The centaur's prophecy had been cut short. After naming a giant king who would rise and transform the age, the centaur leader had faded before finishing. His black mane had turned gray before their eyes, and he died that winter, drained by the cost of prophecy. If even he could glimpse such a destiny, whatever lay ahead for Zar would not be ordinary. Sirius believed Zar would not die now. On the seabed, mud and sand churned into a darker, thicker cloud. The kraken fixed its countless eyes on the turmoil with shock and awe. Despite barrages of attacks, Zar's form remained, clinging amidst the debris. With every collision, the kraken felt that beneath Zar something like a volcano was gathering, explosive power waiting to erupt. Even it felt trepidation. This child, the kraken thought, what is his origin? Can Titan blood alone account for this? Or is he some Titan descendant preserved by time magic? As its doubts flickered, the seabed current cleared slowly. Zar's form came into focus. He was a horrifying sight. More than half his body had been stripped of flesh and blood, white bones shining through. Many of his bones were shattered. He looked like a broken toy on the brink of complete ruin. Even for someone with legendary life, these injuries were grave. His recovery could no longer keep pace with the destruction. Yet Zar smiled. Half his cheek was gone, exposing teeth and facial bone, but still he smiled. On the system panel, legendary life glowed. Since its sublimation, ordinary tempering had little effect, but the kraken's relentless pounding acted like a forging hammer, burning impurities from Zar's life force. Legendary life improved a little. The greatest change, however, was in legendary power. The text for that ability shimmered and blurred as if new lines would appear. The entire entry was on the verge of stepping up a level. Zar could feel the transformation nearing completion. He only needed one final shove. The kraken's pressure was close, but not quite enough. "Kraken," Zar rasped, blood and seawater streaming. "Are you sure you're holding back? Is that all your strength? Push harder." The kraken fell silent. It understood exactly why Zar had sought the deep sea, to use the kraken's pressure to force a transformation. Tales from its ancestors came to mind, legends of the Olympus era, when Titan giants ruled and were worshipped like gods. Some beings had, through trial and tempering, risen to dine among the Titans and been elevated by their favor. Zar's battered figure began overlapping with those legends in the kraken's mind. The kraken's gaze hardened. "Little wizard," it said slowly, "perhaps you will become an extraordinary being, surpassing the four founders, even comparable to the old Olympus Titans. So now, don't die, okay?" Crimson veins of bloodlight began to lace along the kraken's body and through every tentacle. Ancient, powerful magic hummed from those lines. A muffled chant echoed along the seabed. Laguz, Thurisaz, Hagalaz. Rune names rolled off the kraken's tongue. Zar sucked in a breath. His face turned serious. The kraken, too, carried a faint Titan giant bloodline, ancient magic running in Titan blood. This changed everything. The seawater around Zar began to roil. A colossal whirlpool formed on the seabed, swallowing him. He felt a mass of currents pummeling him from every direction, like 1,000 invisible whips. Even with platinum-grade water enhancement, the storm overwhelmed his control. His wounds split open again as the currents sliced like blades. Blood clouded the water, and flecks of white bone drifted in the red flood. Zar felt every second as a tormenting eternity. It was like being raked with knives, death by 1,000 cuts. He teetered on the edge of collapse, his vision dimmed. Yet inside him a stubborn fire burned. Each flash of pain, each flash of the system's light advanced legendary power closer to its final step. Squeezing out reserves of strength, he stabilized himself one more time. He did not know how long he endured. A minute, 3 minutes, or 100 lifetimes. Then at last, the system panel changed. The legendary anti-toppling ability vanished. In its place, new text bloomed. Legendary radiance, bright and dazzling. Strength enhancement, legendary level, sublimated once. And beneath it, a new sublimation trait, indomitable strength. Chapter 224, Strength, Renewed Blessing, Alchemy Talent on Sprout Island, the sea churned. When the North Sea Kraken had used ancient magic on the seabed to form the giant whirlpool, enormous waves rolled even onto the shore, a clear sign of tremendous power stirring far below. Giant priest Sirius, who firmly believed Char was the one from the prophecy, nonetheless wore a worried expression as he felt the seabed's magical aura. "Ancient magic," he muttered. "That North Sea kraken actually carries a trace of Titan giant bloodline." "It makes sense," another said. "The old sea god was one of the more unrestrained Titan giants. His bloodline would be scattered throughout the ocean. For a beast that size, it'd be odd if he didn't have sea god blood." Sirius inhaled deeply. The deep seabed was the perfect place for that bloodline to assert itself. The ancient magic the kraken wielded felt even purer, more complete than the ancient fire he knew. Its power far outstripped his own. Could Char possibly survive such force? The question barely formed when Sirius's body went rigid. His gaze snapped to the whirlpool. "What is that?" The same surprised cry sounded from the kraken in the depths. It had intended to withdraw its ancient magic. The battle with Char had already pushed Char to the brink, and upon realizing Char might share Titan giant blood, the kraken had been inclined to treat him as a distant kin. Char had even fed it tasty blood sometimes. The kraken didn't want him to die during training. Then, it felt a terrifying surge of crisis in the whirlpool, a sensation reminiscent of facing Ms. Hufflepuff all those years ago. A bony arm reached through the whirlpool and with a tearing motion ripped the ancient magic apart. If Char's figure hadn't staggered out of the shattered vortex, the kraken might have believed something monstrous had emerged and fled. Instead, it stared at Char, astonished. "Kid," it croaked, "what on earth did you just do?" Char's eyes were fixed on the system panel. The new trait from the sublimation of legendary power, unyielding strength, was displayed. Legendary power sublimation trait, unyielding strength. The more desperate the situation, the stronger the power, can increase by 1 sublimation at most. His eyes lit. Like the earlier legendary life sublimation, the trait was blunt and ferocious, perfect for combat. The sublimated trait activated at the worst moment in the whirlpool, when Char was already battered and at his limit. Unyielding strength surged to its maximum. Char watched the legendary power readout on the system panel flare, briefly and temporarily racing up to the equivalent of a second sublimation. Each time a legendary ability sublimates, it marks a step toward the mythical level. The farther along, the larger the boost from that sublimation, sometimes greater than the total of all previous increases. Char felt that increase keenly. With a casual motion, he released power that tore the kraken's ancient magic apart. The surge was fleeting. Legendary life rapidly repaired his wounds, and as his body healed, the unyielding strength boost collapsed, slipping back toward the level following the first sublimation. He'd returned to being notably stronger than before he started sublimating, but the recent peak was incomparable. Char took a long breath, steadying himself after the dizzying disparity. Across from him, the kraken's gaze held a strange mixture of seriousness and awe. "Hey," it rumbled, "little wizard, do you have a family tree? You should check if your ancestors were main gods back in the Olympus era. How else could you carry such a powerful Titan giant bloodline? It's not on the same level as the old 4 founders of Hogwarts, but at your age, you might surpass them in 10 or 20 years. Char's eyes brightened at that. The strength of the 4 founders had always been shrouded in mystery. Even in his previous life, opinions ranged wildly. Some said the founders were far weaker than Voldemort and Dumbledore. Others argued they were equal or even superior. There was no decisive evidence. The 4 founders lived 1,000 years ago. Their records were scant. But the kraken had fought Miss Hufflepuff, one of the founders. Its words were valuable. The power Char had just released had hit the level of a second sublimation momentarily, yet the kraken still thought Miss Hufflepuff was far beyond him. The kraken guessed it could take Char a decade or 2 to catch up. From that, Char inferred that Miss Lore, Hufflepuff's specialized magic, should be at legendary with 3 sublimations. The other founders likely sat in the same realm, though in varying progress. Godric Gryffindor and Salazar Slytherin were probably the strongest among them, perhaps with multiple abilities at 3 sublimations, maybe only a step from the mythical. The gap from legend to mythical, he realized, was huge. None of the founders were likely mythical. By extension, Dumbledore and Voldemort should also be around 3 sublimations. Dumbledore wielded the Elder Wand, clearly a mythical item, so in practice, Dumbledore might edge past the founders, closer to mythical. Experiencing the gap in legendary ability personally clarified for Char how far he had to go. He had two legendary abilities that had gone through their first sublimation. The top forces in the magical world probably had many more. There was no frustration in him, only fervor. Seeing the gap was better than being blind to it. From the original work, he knew Dumbledore and Voldemort hadn't changed much over the centuries, which suggested that even for prodigies, it was hard to cross from three sublimations to mythical. If he kept planting and growing, maybe he could be the first to reach mythical. After this first school year, he would have several years of steady development. No matter what Quirrell had planned in the Forbidden Forest, after the legendary power sublimation, Char felt confident he could handle it. Who would have guessed that a first-year Hufflepuff, still weak in magic but with a strong body, could already glimpse the backs of Voldemort and Dumbledore? His earlier unease about changes to the Philosopher's Stone plot evaporated. Strength is the source of confidence, he told himself. With that clarity, Char rose toward the sea's surface. When trolls and house elves saw him break through, silence held for a beat before the island erupted into cheers. Nearly 100 trolls bellowed in a thunderous roar. Even giant priest Sirius waved his staff, roaring along, "Grunk, grunk." All doubt vanished from his eyes. Only fervent devotion remained. In the midst of that fervent atmosphere, the eye of mentality on Char's forehead, an effect of his heightened sixth sense, tingled and opened by itself. Amid chaotic lines and colors, he spotted strands of exceptionally pure light reaching toward him. They flowed into Demeter's silver cup in his hands. Char's heart stirred. Had these lines been the faith power he'd suspected the cup needed to absorb? He looked at the pute fruit planted across Sprout Island and felt his eagerness. The trip to Doraria Island had been worth it. He'd risked the strange temple and left a suspected god as an enemy, but the harvest was already paying off. Once harvested, he could divide the rhizomes and plant a much larger area. Most of the flat land on Sprout Island was already cultivated, but with the trolls' strength, filling gullies wasn't a problem. Conservative estimates put the next batch's yield at least double. The Demeter Silver Cup's blessing ability had cooled down and was ready again. With the rush of faith just then, Char felt this blessing could elevate more seeds than when he blessed karate grass before. That meant many more bronze-level reward orbs among the next batch, immense benefit for Charles. Char thought of himself by that name sometimes. He'd grown used to both. As the trolls' cheers ebbed, Char spoke. "Today will be a harvest of abundant pute fruit. After we set aside what we need for replanting, there will be enough to fill every troll's belly. You on Sprout Island will no longer struggle for food, nor endure hunger and cold in winter. Pute fruit isn't the most delicious, but today I can fill your stomachs. Soon you'll have bread and milk." The simple promise struck deep. The trolls, who had once been threatened and hungry, were already living like they were in paradise, playing in the water and eating shrimp and fish. Char's promise filled their eyes with joy. Sirius, who had long thought the troll race destined to live like beasts, suddenly had tears in his eyes. Char ordered the trolls to harvest carefully. They packed ripe pute fruit into huge rope sacks, grunting joyfully at every full bag, each sack a blessing from their king. Char raised his wand, holding Demeter's silver cup, and performed the Demeter ritual magic. "Cantate ovantes, segas alta virit," he chanted. "Sing of the fertile land where grains grow strong." A bright silver light poured from the cup over the finest pute fruit he had set aside, the cup's blessing that could elevate crops. Immediately information popped before Char's eyes. "You have obtained pute fruit blessed by Demeter ritual magic. Its level has increased. After cultivation to maturity, reward, stamina enhancement, bronze level." Char's eyes shone. Just as he'd expected, the blessing had raised the pute fruit's reward level enough to qualify as bronze. No new reward types had appeared, but that wasn't surprising. Bronze-level crops that could offer multiple new reward types were rare. What pleasantly surprised him was that these blessed pute fruit had significantly more magic nodes than before. That meant each fruit could be divided into more tubers and produce more bronze-level seeds. If this continued, in less than a year, all the pute fruit on Sprout Island could be bronze level. That improvement, to Char, was more valuable than a marginally better new reward. He handed the blessed batch to giant priest Sirius and instructed him to lead the trolls in careful planting. Sirius's expression grew serious. He nodded repeatedly. His gaze fell on the Demeter silver cup in Char's hand, and after a moment he asked cautiously, "My king, this item, is this the Demeter silver cup of the goddess of fertility from the Olympus era?" Char blinked. He had indeed given Sirius an alchemy book earlier, a difficult tome he borrowed from the restricted section, a book that had reduced even Snape to frustration, titled Introduction to Alchemy. He hadn't expected Sirius to know about the Demeter silver cup. "Sirius," Char asked, "how much of that book did you read?" Sirius's voice trembled with reverence. "My king gave me such a precious chance to learn alchemy. I feel unworthy. Time was short. I read it 3 times, back and forth. I barely grasped the contents." Then he added, almost apologetically, "May I learn more advanced alchemy? Is my talent too dull?" Char was astonished. He himself had struggled through even a single page of that book. Sirius, in much less time, had read it 3 times and understood it? The thought woke a notion in him. According to bloodline memory, the troll's origin traced to Hephaestus, the Olympus god of fire, the patron of blacksmiths and sculptors. Hephaestus stood at the pinnacle of ancient alchemy. Many divine artifacts were forged by him, and he had even created mythical-level seeds. Perhaps Sirius's alchemy talent came from Hephaestus's bloodline within him. That would explain his rapid comprehension. Char didn't feel jealous. He was excited. Alchemy was vast and deep, and Char already had to devote much time to herbology. If Sirius could advance in alchemy, it would be beneficial for Sprout Island. Alchemists were rare in the magical world and could generate wealth and resources for a force. Char passed the Demeter silver cup to Sirius. "Look it over. Can you restore it to its original state? Even partial recovery of its power would help." Sirius cradled the cup as if it were the most precious thing, his rough fingers tracing its patterns. A memory seemed to surface in him, images of his ancestor in Olympus working at a gigantic forge. "Ah, yes, my ancestor's unmatched craft forged such a cup. I can see him, a huge furnace, a massive hammer, gleaming mithril. Forged for years, the pinnacle of ancient alchemy created this nearly indestructible cup. How could it become so damaged over time?" Regret filled his face. Char asked, "Is repair possible?" Sirius's eyes shone, then dimmed. "If I continue studying alchemy, with the vision I just saw in my bloodline, there is a slim chance I could mend some of its patterns, but many of the materials required no longer exist in this world." The words hit Char like cold water. He felt the disappointment, but then Sirius added, "There is another way. One item can replace many of those lost, precious materials. If I had it, and enough time, I might restore part of the silver cup." Char's heart raced. "What item?" Sirius answered solemnly. "An incredible alchemical product, the Philosopher's Stone." Chapter 225, Choices, the White King, Shocking Harvest. When Sirius mentioned the Philosopher's Stone, Xiaer couldn't hide his surprise. It took him a beat to answer, voice a mixture of curiosity and doubt. "The Philosopher's Stone? Isn't it supposed to turn lead into gold and make the elixir of life? How would that help repair Demeter's silver cup?" Sirius shook his head and explained, "My king, most people misunderstand the stone's turning lead into gold power as simply converting one metal to another. That's an oversimplification. How many alchemists in history actually made a true Philosopher's Stone? For those who could, galleons are like dirt. Its transmutation function barely matters. The stone's real value lies elsewhere. Creating the elixir of life is only part of it." Xiaer thought that over. It made sense, but what did that transmutation actually mean? Sirius continued, revealing the truth. The Philosopher's Stone can turn ordinary magical materials into incredibly rare, or even extinct, ancient substances. Possessing it is like having the key to study ancient alchemy today. For alchemists, its value surpasses even eternal life. And in our current situation, only the Philosopher's Stone could repair Demeter's silver cup for you. That hit home. In the original story's telling, Harry hadn't understood the stone's true worth. Now Xiaer did. His heart beat faster, because the stone was in Hogwarts Castle. If he planned carefully, there might be a way. And then his sixth sense prickled across his brow, warning him away. Thinking about the Philosopher's Stone would not end well. He immediately suppressed the thought and settled his mind. If he went after it, he'd have to confront the two-faced man. That wasn't the pushover from the original tale who got overwhelmed by Harry's reckless punches. This version would be far more dangerous. Even if Ciel somehow ripped the stone from the tiger's jaws, how would he hide it from Dumbledore? If Dumbledore discovered the theft itself would be worthless. The headmaster's attention would never leave him afterward. And even if he risked everything and got the stone, Sirius might not know how to use it, or it might fail to work. Would getting a few repairs on the Demeter Cup really change his lot that much? All those calculations passed through his head. He rejected the scheme. He had already never revealed the World Tree roots or the Fire God's seed, two mythical items, and both remained secret. He wouldn't chase high-risk, low-certainty schemes. His strength had already grown more than expected. This wasn't the time for desperate gambles. Decision made, he exhaled softly. His emotions calmed like an old well. He wouldn't involve himself further with the Philosopher's Stone. After his legendary power had been sublimated, he felt confident handling whatever traps the two-faced man left in the Forbidden Forest. There were still days to prepare, but he wasn't going to waste them. "I'll keep farming," he told himself. Compared with the plot-driven thrills of the original story, Ciel preferred tending plants. He'd neglected the little greenhouse while worrying about the two-faced man. Thinking of his plots and seeds made him peaceful. Quirrell's attention was elsewhere for now, so he could return to the greenhouse. Sprout Island was getting established. He could trust Sirius and the others with it. With that settled, he headed back to Hogwarts, straight to the little greenhouse he hadn't entered in ages. He had just dispelled the protective wards and was about to step in when he felt something. He spun, wand at the ready. A tall figure stood not far behind him, bathed in silver moonlight. Dumbledore looked at him with calm ocean-blue eyes and a pleasant expression. "Good evening, Ciel," the headmaster said. "The moon is lovely tonight. People my age often can't sleep, so I came out to enjoy it. Won't you invite me in?" Ciel's stomach dropped. "Can't sleep, out for a stroll, and happened to run into me." That was nonsense. Dumbledore coming to find him at this hour meant only one thing: trouble. Reluctantly, he let Dumbledore in. He had to know what the headmaster wanted. Inside, Dumbledore inspected the plants with genuine wonder. During the academic review, he'd already noticed some of the variants, and even in half a term, the greenhouse's oddities had multiplied. He lingered over the humping willow cuttings and scanned the shadows. Whatever phantom lurked there felt exposed under the old man's gaze. Ancient shadow magic shuddered as if it could not hide anything from him. Ciel felt helpless. Dumbledore might as well have seen through every secret in his greenhouse. Finally, Dumbledore retracted his gaze and looked at Ciel with surprise. Snape had been right. The boy was genuinely gifted in herbology. The discovery seemed to strengthen Dumbledore's resolve. After a few exclamations of admiration, he said, "Ciel, I've heard from several professors that your performance this year has been excellent, far beyond what we expect from a first year. Hogwarts is fortunate to have such a rare talent. Any other student would have been ecstatic, but Ciel was not any other student." In his previous life, praise from a mentor usually meant entanglement, corporate projects, draining his time, serving someone else. Dumbledore was likely more cunning than those mentors. Ciel kept a shy, embarrassed air, waving his hands as if deflecting praise. It put Dumbledore at ease. The headmaster thought their conversation was off to a good start. But Ciel's mouth kept going. He blurted out embarrassing, inside information. "Principal, I don't deserve your praise. The professors praised me because I bribed them, and where they wouldn't accept gifts, my aunt intervened. After all, my aunt is a Hufflepuff dean, and she made them go easy on me. Having connections is really great. Oh, by the way, Principal, I'm growing a batch of excellent karate grass. Would you like some when it's ready? Please look after me in future." Dumbledore froze, his prepared speech derailed. He tried to reassert the lesson. One should rely on one's own efforts, but Ciel eagerly agreed, and then launched into an earnest speech about Dumbledore leading a new era of the magical world. Dumbledore felt as if he'd wandered into a ministry meeting. After a long pause, he recovered. "Ciel," he said, "the The defense against the dark arts assessment this year will take place in the Forbidden Forest. Those students who have detentions and are scheduled to patrol the forest at term's end will have their punishments merged into this assessment. They will enter the exam grounds from a different entrance. That means you, Harry, Hermione, and Ron will be together. He spoke earnestly. The Forbidden Forest was dangerous. Mutual help would be necessary. With great power comes great responsibility, he added. The strong should strive to protect the weak. Do you agree? Dumbledore expected hesitation. Instead, Ciel nodded vigorously. Yes, principal is right. With great power comes great responsibility. With less power comes less responsibility. The strong should protect the weak. Relieved, Dumbledore relaxed. He was genuinely a kind man. He still worried whether Pomona would be furious with him for this, but Quirrell's arrangements forced his hand. He had little choice but to prepare. That's excellent. With you protecting Harry and the others, he began. Ciel leapt up in panic, voice going high. What did you say, Principal? You must be mistaken. Me protecting Harry and them? Didn't you mean Harry and the others should protect me? Dumbledore blinked. Huh? When did I ever say otherwise? Ciel went on with complete innocence. You said the strong should protect the weak. If I go into the Forbidden Forest with Harry and the three of them, 3 is greater than 1, right? They're Gryffindors, brave and bold. I'm from Gwanhouse, gentle and weak. 3 Gryffindors are stronger than 1 Gwanhouse, so they're the strong and I'm the weak. I should be protected. He laid out a ranking. Harry the Savior had the most power and responsibility. Ron, raised in a pure magical family, was stronger than Ciel, who had grown up in the Muggle world. Hermione was book-smart and therefore stronger, and Ciel, who had barely scraped into Hogwarts, was the weakest. With the least power comes the least responsibility, he concluded. So I must be protected. Headmaster Dumbledore, you wouldn't expect me, the weakest, to protect Harry and the others, would you? I'm a weak, pitiful, helpless student. I don't know the Forbidden Forest at all. I'm terrified of it. Dumbledore stared, speechless for a long moment. He'd never seen such dramatic acting. Ciel's insistence tugged at a memory. The boy had struggled in the Muggle world, doing hard nursery work from a young age, scraping by until 11. Even Harry had not had to fight like that. Feeling guilty, Dumbledore softened. It would be too much to ask Ciel to take such risk without compensation. At the same time, Dumbledore could not ignore the danger Quirrell posed. If Harry died in the forest, everything could unravel. He needed Ciel to help protect them, but not for nothing. Ciel, sensing Dumbledore's resolve, was already bargaining inwardly. He would protect the Gryffindors, but he would not do it free. No one should be taken advantage of from the start, not even Ciel. He wanted payment. Before Dumbledore could speak, Ciel shifted tone and launched into a grand declaration. Of course they must help each other. He could not abandon his classmates, even if he was the sole heir of the Sprout family and had to risk his life. If it benefited the magical world, he would not hesitate. Dumbledore, moved, made his decision. I won't ask you to protect Harry and the others for nothing, he said resolutely. He took a breath, looked around the greenhouse, and raised his elder wand. Expecto Patronum! A bright cry split the night. A shining silver phoenix, radiant and sacral, burst forth from his wand. Ciel felt his mind stutter. The descriptions he'd read and the scenes he'd seen on screen paled beside the force of real magic. No wonder even masters like Snape had little recourse before Dumbledore. Even Voldemort had once shrank back. This wizard, wielding the Elder Wand, was terrifying. Ciel suspected Dumbledore might be as close to mythical level as anyone alive, perhaps in more than one discipline. The silver phoenix descended onto the guardian tree. Its sacred radiance flowed into the tree and into the reward orbs attached to it. Ciel watched, stunned, as the orbs, things that would normally take a month to mature, rapidly accelerated. Their colors upgraded, silver to gold, gold to platinum, and within the platinum glow, tiny diamond sparks began to appear. The change finally stabilized. Even after seeing so much, Ciel's eyes widened. Dumbledore exhaled faintly, looking slightly drained but satisfied. The guardian tree is a sacred tree imbued with protective magic, naturally resistant to the dark arts, he said. Coincidentally, I've done some work with sacred magic. I hope these trees can be of use to you. Xia'er stared at the 20-odd orbs now glowing with platinum and diamond light, heart racing. A single kindness from the foremost wizard in the world had just turned into immense value. System messages flashed before his eyes, making his pulse pound. The guardian tree you planted has been affected by legendary power, which has been sublimated 3 times in sacred magic. The guardian tree you planted has been affected by mythical level magic. The guardian tree reward level has been greatly increased. When the guardian tree matures, you can receive the following rewards: defense against the dark arts perception between platinum and diamond, dark arts resistance, gold, occlumency enhancement, gold, Patronus charm enhancement. Xia'er felt his grin spread uncontrollably. Dumbledore's patronage, his thigh, was truly invaluable. Watching the guardian trees before him, now almost fully transformed, Char felt a thrill of uncontrollable excitement. Dumbledore's Patronus charm had produced an outcome far beyond what he had expected. He had originally estimated that the harvest from these trees would only yield insights into defense against the dark arts between gold and platinum grades, and that dark arts resistance reaching silver would be a good result. Now, with the trees maturing early and dozens of reward spheres shimmering with platinum and diamond light, Char's understanding of defense against the dark arts would likely leap directly to diamond grade. It would become his second diamond grade magic-related insight after Serpensortia had temporarily risen to diamond. Defense against the dark arts was a broad field rather than a single spell, but diamond grade insight was still immensely valuable. It could raise Char's magical ability by a significant margin, and in techniques specifically aimed at combating dark arts, the effect could be extraordinary. In every way, this felt like an absolute steal. After the harvest, his dark arts resistance should reach platinum grade as well. That would give him substantial protection against most dark arts. In the original story, Cerberus, with its tough hide and dark arts resistance, had managed to hold off the two-faced man for nearly a term, leaving him helpless. Even if that two-faced man was weakened, Cerberus's durability showed how difficult it was to deal with. With platinum dark arts resistance, and on top of that, his legendary life and legendary power, both having gained a sublimation, Char would be far stronger than Cerberus in almost every respect, except that he lacked the dark arts damage attached to Cerberus's teeth. 99% of dark wizards would likely feel nothing but despair facing Char now. Insight into defense against the dark arts combined with high dark arts resistance could act like a disproportionate advantage against the dangers lurking in Hogwarts in the coming years. And there was occlumency. Char had already gained a great deal from occlumency training, but his progress had slowed as platinum-grade occlumency approached its limit. The boost from this harvest would save him a lot of time. An absolute steal, he murmured. It truly is an absolute steal, he repeated to himself, unable to suppress a grin. Then his gaze fell on the silver grade enhancement for the Patronus charm, and surprise flickered across his face. In the original story, the Patronus charm appeared frequently, often crucial when Harry and his friends fought Dementors. He had always believed the spell was created specifically to fight Dementors. But after looking into the history of magic and magical creatures, Char had noticed something puzzling. Dementors had been discovered on a remote archipelago relatively recently, yet the Patronus charm was one of the oldest spells known. That didn't add up. If the spell's purpose was only to combat Dementors, why would wizards create it before Dementors were even known? And using such a difficult spell just to send messages, when owls could do that, seemed absurd. Dumbledore, standing beside him, had the deepest mastery of the Patronus charm in the magical world, so Char simply asked, "Professor," he said, "was that spell just now the Patronus charm? The books say it's used against Dementors, but as far as I know, when it was created, Dementors hadn't been discovered yet." Dumbledore looked surprised, then impressed. "Very keen observation, Char. In this regard, you are the sharpest I've met, sharper even than many praised geniuses." His expression then grew serious. "I imagine you have visited the restricted section more than once. You may have noticed the Patronus charm is kept there. Theoretically, Hogwarts students shouldn't come across it until after they graduate. Have you ever wondered why?" Char had. When he'd read the original story in his previous life, he'd wanted to complain about Dumbledore's strictness, denying young wizards access to advanced magic, even a spell of light and justice like the Patronus. But Dumbledore's face now showed a deeper reason. Char leaned in and listened. After a long breath, Dumbledore began to tell a secret rarely shared. Actually, the Patronus charm is one of the few known spells that dates back to the era of Olympus. When that glorious age shattered, the temples that once offered continuous miracles fell silent. Olympus itself, and the wizards who were revered as gods, vanished. Many survivors were devastated, faith cracked, and people's wills fell apart. A strong will is a prerequisite for many advanced magics. Yet most people are mediocre, living day to day without lofty aspiration. Their wills are weak. In that decadent era, magic itself was in decline. One far-sighted genius believed the Olympus glory could be rebuilt, but only if current wizards could collectively unleash the power of will. Dumbledore paused, then continued in a low voice. After cruel experiments on muggles and even fellow wizards, that wizard finally understood the mysteries of magic, spirit, and will. He created an astonishing spell, the earliest form of the Patronus charm. Its effect was to forcibly materialize a wizard's will. The materialized will, driven by magic, could perform incredible feats, sometimes even exceeding its master. Char's eyes widened. The original Patronus wasn't for Dementors at all, but to awaken and condense will, to materialize it into an entity that could use magic. Even the weakest wizard could, by force of this spell, produce a focused, materialized will that might unleash power beyond their own. Dumbledore's voice softened with admiration, regret, and fear. It was powerful and practical. If it had spread unchecked, it would have changed the magical world's history. But consider, if a kind, weak wizard materialized his will, it could only help. If an evil or twisted wizard, too weak to act, suddenly had his will materialize into an entity with full capability, what then? Char's pupils constricted. Disaster. Exactly. Disaster doesn't begin to describe it. At first, everything seemed to thrive, but those materialized evil wills began to mutate in unimaginable ways. How could weak wizards control such creations? The entities took everything: flesh, spirit, memories, life. What remained was an empty shell driven by a ravenous, evil will, insatiable greed, a hunger to steal others' happiness, even to feed on souls. A bolt of insight hit Char. This couldn't be. Dumbledore nodded. This is the origin of Dementors. If Dementors hadn't once been wizards, how could they wear robes, understand wizard language, and so fiercely crave wizards' happiness and souls? Once Dementors appeared, the number of them was large, but so were the number of wizards with goodwill. After fierce struggle, wizards defeated the Dementors. But the monsters had been stripped of life by their own wills. What remained were lifeless shells. Because there was no life to destroy, they could not be killed, only exiled to a remote island and sealed by magic. Char stared in shock. The Patronus charm's origin, the birth of Dementors, everything fit. But Dumbledore's expression darkened further. Do you think the calamity ended there? Char hesitated. Dementors were exiled. Doesn't that mean it was under control? Dumbledore smiled bitterly. Wizards of the time thought so. They modified the spell so it could no longer materialize evil wills, only good ones. They set about dividing people into good and evil, with the good in power and the evil punished. But history shows what followed: persecution, trials, bloodshed. Each side had its own definition of good. When good was made absolute, it caused untold suffering. The modified Patronus, turned into a force that had to be carefully controlled, is why the spell now requires such strict regulation. It must be summoned by a firm will and positive emotion, and even then, it's used only against Dementors or as a means of communication. The spell was placed in the restricted section for a reason. The lessons were too painful. In a sense, the persecution of wizards in the Middle Ages is the poisonous legacy of that spell. One thought still nagged Char. Professor, if the uncontrolled evil wills left Dementors behind, did any uncontrolled good wills leave something behind too? A sharp light flashed in Dumbledore's blue eyes. He looked at Char long and hard. That's an excellent question. Frankly, I'd rather we never know the answer. He cut the conversation short, took out a piece of parchment, and wrote the incantation and usage notes for the Patronus charm. Char, he said, you already qualify to learn the Patronus charm. Although the original form caused calamities, the current version has no hidden danger. You can practice it with confidence. Even now, the Patronus is a materialized form of will. It integrates your conscious will and can condense even subconscious will. That has great benefit to magical improvement. For any wizard aiming for the pinnacle, the Patronus charm is a spell you must learn. Dumbledore rose warily. The defense against the dark arts exam, and Harry and the others' safety in the Forbidden Forest. I'll leave those to you. As Dumbledore left the little greenhouse, Char took a deep breath. The secret he'd just learned sat heavily in his mind. The materialized evil had left behind immortal dementors. What had uncontrolled good wills left? Dumbledore had been unwilling to discuss it further. The magical world was deeper and darker than he'd imagined. Still, Char comforted himself with practicalities. With Dumbledore around, there would be protection, and speculation without evidence did no good. The important thing was to do what was at hand. His eyes returned to the guardian trees. Thanks to Dumbledore's Patronus, the trees had not only increased in level, but sped up their maturation. It looked likely they could be harvested before the defense against the dark arts exam. Even if he had to bring Harry and the others along, Char felt confident. He glanced at the parchment Dumbledore had left, and a small smile crossed his face. The Patronus charm, huh? I wonder what my Patronus will be. He lifted his wand and, steadying himself, spoke the incantation. Expecto Patronum. A silver mist surged from the tip of Char's wand. Chapter 227, Difficulty, Mutation, Epiphany. When Char waved his wand, a thin silver mist sprayed from the tip. A strange sensation rose in his chest. Part of his will seemed to be drawn into that mist, forming a peculiar link. Char frowned in surprise. He had long understood the bond between will and magic, but it was always the will that controlled the magic. This was the first time he'd seen magic actually draw on the will. Even if this was an altered form of the original Patronus charm, which in its raw state might have pulled on will to condense a materialized intent, it was still an extraordinary, dangerous kind of enchantment. No wonder it had left such a bloody mark on history. He glanced at the system panel. After his last attempt, the faint label Patronus Charm had appeared, but it hadn't fully formed. The system judged he had not yet reached the entry threshold for the spell. Char wasn't surprised. The original books had already shown how difficult the Patronus Charm was. Harry hadn't begun to master it until his third year, partly because he'd absorbed some of Voldemort's magic as a Horcrux and had exceptional talents, yet it still took him a year to produce a full Patronus. Ron and Hermione only learned it in their 5th year, after months of secret training with Dumbledore's army. By then, students were almost adults and well-practiced in advanced magic. If talented older students found it so demanding, Char understood that his current state made rapid mastery unlikely. His system readouts helped him assess the situation. His magic perception had been upgraded to platinum grade, excellent, yet his raw magic power within Hogwarts was probably only lower middle tier. The Patronus charm demanded a lot of power, which would make his progress slow. Fortunately, his water enhancement ability was also platinum now. When triggered, it could boost his power and make up for some shortfall. He exhaled, steadying himself. His starting conditions had once been much worse. He'd learned magic anyway. A little more effort would see him forward. He would proceed steadily rather than rush for miracles. Char resumed practice. Thin silver threads of mist issued from his wand again and again as he concentrated. The Patronus entry on the system panel became clearer, inching toward bronze grade. In the little greenhouse, the silver mist, carrying strands of his will, slowly accumulated. One wisp brushed against the book he'd taken from Lucius Malfoy, Herpo's grimoire, and the reaction was immediate. The grimoire swallowed the mist. Its flesh-like pages began to turn. More mist streamed toward it and was absorbed. The pages flipped faster until a rustling vortex formed above the book, pulling nearly all the mist into itself. Char's pupils contracted. Herpo's grimoire had a notorious reputation. Most of its pages were a tangle of mad, anguished words. He had only skimmed it before and given up, keeping it as a curiosity rather than a research focus. He had never expected the silver mist from the Patronus practice to trigger anything. Lines of coherent, ancient Greek script arranged themselves on the first page. I am Herpo. I made a grievous mistake. I failed to seal my malignant materialized will. It escaped. I fear its influence, and that of the Patronus charm I created, will not end here. I must find a countermeasure, or a terrible calamity will follow. The writing stopped. Even as more silver mist fed the book, no more lines appeared. The grimoire went silent. Char felt shock wash over him. Dumbledore had once said a genius from ancient Greece had forged the Patronus charm through cruel experiments. Was that Herpo? The grimoire suggested he had predicted the charm's dangerous after-effects and had left a way to counter them, hidden in his notes. The idea made Char's skin crawl. If there were hidden hazards here, it could easily spiral into something catastrophic. He would rather not know. Still, relief came in small measure. The grimoire's true words only surfaced under the magic of the Patronus charm, and only when the spell reached a certain level. For now, his fledgling attempts hadn't advanced far enough to unlock more. Whatever danger lay hidden, it wouldn't erupt immediately. He could postpone dealing with it until he could actually produce his own Patronus. Tired after the mental strain of practicing will-heavy magic, Char decided to go to the Guanhouse common room for tea. He wanted something warm to settle his nerves. When he tiptoed in, he found a surprising sight. All the first years were awake and gathered in the common room. It was barely 5 in the morning. Students normally treasured every extra second of sleep. What could have driven them out of bed? They weren't at the little kitchen either. They were practicing charms. Char blinked. What's going on? Since when did our house turn into a competition? The group turned toward him, irritation written on sleepy faces. Hannah, hair mussed and eyes tired, answered with a half-mournful laugh. When did Guanhouse become competitive? You, the king of competition who's always pulling all-nighters, show some self-awareness. If we had a choice, who'd want to wake up this early? Another student chimed in. It's because of the Defense Against the Dark Arts assessment. The Forbidden Forest, someone added, and the mention sent a ripple through the room. They say there'll be vampires, werewolves, everything evil. The Weasley brothers bet half our year will die in there, another voice reported, and a few of the students shivered. They said Gryffindor's crying too, Hannah continued. Slytherin's trying to fake illness so they don't have to go. Hannah then lowered her voice and came over to Char, worry plain on her face. We heard you and Harry have to enter the forest through a different entrance. You won't be with us. The rest of the first years looked at him with helpless sympathy. We can't help you, Char. Hannah's fists clenched. But we'll do everything to look after ourselves so you don't have to worry about us. We'll try to get first for the house so you can focus on everything you need to do. We'll be fine. Char felt a warmth in his chest. He hadn't expected the others' strained effort was to keep him from worrying. He smiled and gave them his calmest answer. Don't worry. I'm prepared. Dumbledore won't let terrible things happen. Besides, I've been into the forest with Hagrid more than once. It's not as frightening as people say. The Weasleys like to scare you. Hannah brightened. Really? When do you lie? Her assurance calmed many of the students. The anxious fumbling with basic spells steadied. Char's presence had become a backbone for the first years. He sat at the edge and watched them practice, feeling that small, steady warmth. But, as he thought about the upcoming forest expedition, his eyes hardened. Quirrell's ambitions would target his and Harry's team. The other students would be used to distract Dumbledore and the staff. The Guanhouse first years would be in danger too. Dumbledore would make arrangements, but they couldn't rely solely on him. If Char could give them better means to defend themselves, even in small ways, it might make a difference. His gaze drifted to the system panel and the laser charm he had derived from Lumos. If completed, it would be an ideal spell to teach. Not too difficult, because it came from Lumos within the first year's capability, and it had a piercing, restraining effect on dark creatures, useful for self-preservation in the forest. But laser charm was still blurry on the panel. It wasn't finished. He had been trying to find what it lacked, but hadn't found a spark. Char closed his eyes and activated occlumency, forcing his mind into a high-focus, flow-like state. Around him, time seemed to slow. He rewound the laser charm in his mind, examined every variable, cross-checked components. Minutes stretched. Fatigue throbbed in his temples from the earlier exertion. He rubbed them and was about to ease off when an image snapped into sharpness. He watched the first years practicing Lumos. In one spot, the light behaved oddly, flickering on and off, sometimes dimmer than the room around it, sometimes far brighter than two Lumos spells combined. The irregularity, the sudden surges and drops, triggered a memory of a term from his previous life. A flash of insight struck him. Light interference. That was the missing piece. Inspiration ran through Charles like a spring unloosed. How could he have forgotten so basic a property of light from his previous life? Interference. Light from the same source, under the right conditions, could interfere with itself, superposed to form alternating bright and dark fringes. The bright regions could be far more intense than a single beam. He had been obsessively refining a single cast of Lumos to perfect his self-made charm, trying to push the frequency, concentration, and brightness to the limit his system panel allowed, but the laser spell had never quite formed. Now it hit him. He had been ignoring interactions between multiple Lumos casts. If he hadn't caught the fleeting interaction of the little wizard's Lumos spells while spacing out once, he might never have realized it. The idea unlocked everything. If two Lumos casts could interfere, then constructive interference might amplify the beam into something entirely different. Charles felt his fatigue vanish. He set to work at once. Lumos, aces, he intoned. A concentrated shaft of light shot from his wand. Immediately, he repeated the incantation and sent out a second beam. But when the two met, they didn't brighten. Instead, they dimmed, counteracting each other. Far from discouraged, Charles felt exhilarated. The interference was real. He'd simply misaligned the waves, so they canceled instead of resonating. That was fixable. With more precise control over phase and timing and plenty of practice, he could make them reinforce one another. Start simple, he reminded himself. Build experience with Lumos first. He continued, calling the incantation over and over. Beams of varying brightness spilled from his wand, weaving strange patterns. To everyone else, it looked like a spectacle. To Charles, his enhanced magic perception let him see the microscopic particles of magic from each cast vibrating and interacting. Minute by minute, amid the repetition, a principle rose into focus. To produce constructive interference, the magic particles of sequential casts must resonate, align in frequency and phase. He smiled, flexed his wrist, and tried again. Lumos, aces. This time, the beam that erupted from his wand was thicker and far brighter, so intense it hurt to look at directly. Its destructive capability leapt to a new level. Charles swept the beam across the desk. The wood and the thick stone tiles beneath split cleanly, leaving a smooth, mirror-like incision. It wasn't Sectum Sempra. This charm didn't carry the curse's ability to bypass protections or inflict irreparable wounds, but as a cutting spell, it was astonishing. Who would have thought such a weapon could be born from Lumos? On the system panel, the proof was unmistakable. The previously fuzzy label, Laser Spell, snapped into clarity, and the entries for Lumos and Frequency Light Spell, along with the newly formed Laser Spell, lost their pale platinum shimmer. A clear, diamond-like glow now surrounded them. Lumos and its derivatives had ascended to diamond grade. Charles had once held a diamond-grade serpent sordia, only thanks to a cursed jewelry's blessing. This, however, was the result of his own insight and effort. The diamond sheen was faint but real, and deeply satisfying. A rush of possibilities opened in his mind. At the start of the school year, he'd hoped a platinum-level charm would be a fine achievement for a first year. Now a diamond-grade charm was within reach. Give him a few years, and legendary, or even mythical, might not be impossible. If Lumos ever reached mythical level, the effects would be breathtaking. Thoughts that had worried him, the return of Anthony Dolohov, the threat of Voldemort's resurgence, the Doraria Island Temple, the lingering dangers of a corrupted Patronus charm in the wizarding world, the secrets of the Olympus era, suddenly felt surmountable if he could grow this strong. He emerged from his reverie to the stunned faces of his housemates in the common room. They stared at the perfectly clean cuts in the desk and floor, and the after-image of the blinding light. Charles," one of them stammered. "Was that Lumos?" Charles smiled and nodded. "Technically, a special form of Lumos, a small charm I created." Excitement rippled through the group. Some remembered his earlier self-created charm based on the levitation spell. Another so soon? Susan Bones gaped and then laughed. Are we even in the same school as you? You're making us look bad, someone else teased, though their tone was warm rather than jealous. No, Charles said. I'm not keeping it to myself, but I won't teach it for nothing. He looked around. If anyone wants to learn, there's a condition. The room fell silent. Self-created charms were precious. In the wizarding world, many inventors hoarded their discoveries as family wealth. Charles knew its practical value. Less profitable than a hair growth potion that could make a fortune for a lineage, but potent and easy to learn for anyone who could cast Lumos. 100 galleons might be a conservative estimate for its worth. Hufflepuffs weren't greedy. They considered the implications carefully, then shook their heads at taking payment. Charles let out a small sigh of relief. They weren't schemers, nor ravenous knowledge hounds. They were true to their house's spirit. So, he said earnestly, I'm not giving it away free. In exchange, everyone must get first place in the final assessment. We've spent a year here. No one wants to finish with a weak result, right? Besides, aren't we Hufflepuff? Sharing and helping each other is supposed to be what we do. If one of us had a charm that could save our friends, would we hoard it? I'm often not around, but I'm not about to leave Hufflepuff behind. The Hufflepuffs hesitated, then grit their teeth and nodded, determination in their eyes. If Charles taught them this charm, they would throw everything into topping the exam and securing the house cup. Charles smiled and began teaching the essentials of the laser spell. Once the heavy theoretical work of micromagic and interference was set aside, learning to cast it was only a little more difficult than Lumos or the levitation charm. With practice and the Lumos experience they already had, many of his classmates could manage it. Susan and Hannah, who had practiced Lumos the most, improved quickly. Their lights grew more concentrated and controlled. Charles watched with quiet satisfaction. If they kept at it, by the time the Dark Arts defense exam arrived, they would have an additional offensive option, a means to protect themselves. He stepped aside to let them practice, but something prickled at the back of his neck. He turned to see Professor Sprout standing at the common room doorway. She had been there for who knew how long, watching. She walked over and sat beside him. Charles, she said softly, tears of relief and pride in her eyes. You've done very well. I always felt you had a maturity beyond your peers. That helps your research, but it can isolate you from your housemates. I worried you wouldn't belong, yet you've become part of Hufflepuff. You are a true Hufflepuff. Charles flushed. He'd spent far less time mingling than most, and it was more accurate to say his housemates had welcomed his eccentricities. He felt undeserving of such praise, but Professor Sprout seemed to read him. Hufflepuff has always embraced different personalities, she said, but only those who unite the house and make selfless contributions are truly worthy of the name. That's not my standard, it's Miss Hufflepuff's. She gestured, guiding his gaze to a corner of the common room. A hidden door, previously unnoticed like the Room of Requirements entrances, had quietly manifested. None of the others seemed to have seen it, only Charles did. This is? He asked, astonished. If you've read Hogwarts: A History, you know Slytherin left the Chamber of Secrets at Hogwarts. Accessible only to the worthy, Gryffindor left his sword for true courage, Professor Sprout said. Would you think Miss Hufflepuff left nothing? Go, Charles. Only a true Hufflepuff may receive Miss Hufflepuff's gift. She is waiting for you inside. Chapter 229, The Gift, Mythical Level, World Tree. When Ciel heard his aunt, Professor Sprout, speak, surprise showed in his eyes. The original story mentioned Gryffindor leaving a sword for truly brave students and Slytherin leaving the Chamber of Secrets, but it had never said Helga Hufflepuff left anything similar. Thinking it through, though, it made sense. Why should only Gryffindor and Slytherin leave legacies? Helga Hufflepuff, tolerant, generous, and devoted to her students, would certainly have left something. The original work simply hadn't covered that detail. And even if a Hufflepuff heir had found it before, their low-key nature would have meant no great scandal, so it wasn't mentioned. Ciel took a deep breath as he faced the mysterious door. His aunt had told him to go in and had worn a joyful expression. There shouldn't be danger, and there might be benefits. Helga Hufflepuff had been a wizard at the very peak of the magical world. By the system's scale, Her signature magic would have reached 3 sublimations, a vast gulf above Ciel, who could only briefly scrape the second sublimation of legendary power on the verge of death, thanks to his indomitable will trait. Expectant, he stepped through the doorway. The door closed behind him. The space inside felt like a room of requirement turned into a cozy common room. Not luxurious, but warm and comfortable. On the far wall hung a full-length portrait, an amiable woman holding a golden cup and smiling at him. "Oh," she said, "it's been many years. Another student has come. Let me see, my dear, your name is Ciel, isn't it?" "Ciel Sprout. Sprout is an old family name. I remember meeting your ancestor. For you to trigger the rule I left for first years and show such character, you are an excellent student." Ciel recognized her instantly. "Helga Hufflepuff." "Madam," he said, "it's an honor to meet you." Helga smiled. "A polite young gentleman. Even though I'm only a portrait, I'm glad to see such a good student. Come, don't be nervous. Would you like a drink?" She snapped her fingers. Golden cups and plates appeared. A crystal decanter filled with a purplish-red liquid, a wine, materialized. Ciel blinked. "This is transfiguration?" he asked. "But Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration can't create food or drink, right?" Helga laughed with delight. "Good heavens, Hufflepuff students show promise. You already know the exceptions to Gamp's law from your first year. Many older students never learn that. Child, you are clever." Ciel felt slightly embarrassed by her unreserved praise. Helga clearly loved her house fiercely. She explained placidly, "I can't overturn Gamp's law. This isn't transfiguration. This wine was laid away in Hogwarts long ago, preserved in specially charmed containers. 1,000 years of aging has only enriched it. It strengthens the body and can help develop magical talent. Our Hufflepuff students mature later. A cup can hasten their talents manifesting. But be warned, the effect is strong. Those who drank it before slept for days. One slept nearly a month. Don't drink too much. Come, child, drink. Your future will be better." Just smelling the wine made Ciel's system panel flare. His magic perception, legendary life, and legendary power brightened. Helga's face shone with pride. "My brewing is not inferior to some potions masters. 1,000 years of aging, you'll see." He could not refuse. He tilted his head and drained the cup. A warm current spread from his abdomen. The wine's richness flowed through his flesh and blood. On the panel, the platinum glow over his magic perception thickened. The gold-grade glow brightened and veins of platinum began to thread it. His legendary life and legendary power, already sublimated once, nudged forward. After a sublimation, progress slows drastically. Moving further is a massive leap. Still, the wine caused their lights to inch upward, subtly but certainly. Helga had expected him to fall asleep, yet he stayed lucid and even seemed eager for more. She laughed in pleasure. "You have a good constitution. Our Hufflepuffs should eat well." She refilled his cup. "Drink as much as you like. I enchanted the casks to replenish slowly. Students have come so rarely, it would take decades to empty. Use resources. Don't let good things go to waste." Grateful, Ciel took the second cup. The warmth and the improvements continued, less dramatic than the first time, but significant. Helga poured cup after cup until not a drop remained in the decanter. At last, Ciel let out a loud burp, feeling a faint haze. But when he checked the system, he was thrilled. Legendary life and legendary power had each advanced several points. It was small compared to the leap to a second sublimation, but on the path from legendary to mythical, this progress mattered. The platinum light on his magic perception now covered much of the old gold glow. He was only a step away from breaking through to platinum grade. If he triggered his water enhancement effect, he might temporarily push it all the way, a possibility that thrilled him. He was about to thank Helga when she regarded him with astonishment. "No one has ever drunk an entire pot of my wine without getting drunk," she said. "A giant once stole half a pot and didn't wake for 3 years. After 1,000 years, this wine could make many giants dead drunk." "Child, you show no reaction. This cannot be explained by constitution, unless," her eyes lit, "you carry the blood of the Titan giants?" Ciel blinked. Several beings had suspected Titan giant lineage before, the giant priest, the North Sea Kraken, so it wasn't entirely new. Helga's excitement mounted. "I never expected the bloodline we searched for 1,000 years ago to show up now. In our time, the Olympus Age was legend. Titan giant blood seemed lost. I once found a North Sea kraken and thought to raise it here, but its blood was too thin. We gave up hope. To see you, this is a miracle. Then she asked earnestly, have you learned the Patronus charm? Ciel nodded, then added that his Patronus had not yet taken form. He could only produce a wisp of silver smoke from his wand. Helga relaxed and made a request. If you can, try to condense a higher level Patronus. The higher, the better. Ciel frowned. From what he knew, a Patronus reflected a wizard's character and will. There weren't supposed to be levels. Helga anticipated that and explained. For wizards who do not pursue the ultimate, a Patronus is a materialization of inner will, useful against dementors or for sending messages. But to say Patronuses have no levels is self-deception. A chicken Patronus and a phoenix Patronus, a loach and a basilisk, place them together, and even a squib can tell which is stronger. In my time, a Patronus helped evaluate a wizard. The rarer and more powerful the Patronus, the higher the wizard's potential. There are special effects too. Ciel thought of Dumbledore's Patronus, a silver phoenix blazing like living fire. Helga nodded. That child named Dumbledore went further than any of us. His Patronus is a phoenix, enough to rival Salazar's basilisk. But legends speak of Patronuses that surpass even those, mythical level, the beings worshipped as gods in the Olympus age, the Titan giants. Using them as Patronuses grants power and qualities far beyond phoenixes or basilisks. One ambition behind Expecto Patronum was to recreate the Olympus glory, to condense Titan giants through will and make gods reappear. Her portrait straightened. We all failed pursuing such a Patronus, something we didn't, the Titan giant bloodline. A Patronus's form ties to things closely connected to you. Salazar's family had basilisk ties. Dumbledore's family had phoenix ties. You, Ciel, with Titan giant blood, could potentially call a Titan giant as your Patronus. To Ciel's surprise, a silver Hufflepuff emblem, the kind like the one on the Hogwarts crest, crawled out of the portrait. It ignited in pure silver light. Don't be afraid, child, Helga's voice flowed. This is a Patronus I left inside my portrait by special means. It lets the portrait communicate, preserving some of my memories and knowledge. I left it for moments like this. Her tone turned solemn. For a person's will to condense a mythical level Patronus is almost impossible. The only hope is a wizard very close to the mythical level, willing to give up their Patronus, use it as nourishment to foster new hope. Only then is there a chance. Ciel realized what she intended. Wait, Miss Hufflepuff, he began. He could not understand why she would go so far. Burning her Patronus would dissipate the last of her will. The portrait would become ordinary. Was it worth the sacrifice? Helga answered softly. My will not vanish. From Hogwarts' founding, my will has been properly passed on. Even though the portrait's magic slow the fading, after 1,000 years, my Patronus has lost power. Rather than let it decay, it's better to use it to create hope for the magical world. Hold your breath and feel the Titan giant blood in your flesh and blood. The emblem flared, and silver smoke flowed toward Ciel. His wand tip, without his conscious command, exhaled a silver haze that thickened and fed whatever was forming. A thought flashed through his mind. The world tree root he had once obtained, mythical, connected to the world tree. Could a Patronus be a plant? He closed his eyes and focused on that link, the mountain-like weight he had felt from the world tree root in the ministry vault. The silver smoke changed. It gained weight, ponderous, like a mountain. A crushing pressure drove down on Ciel as he tried to shape a world tree Patronus. Crack. He half-kneeled to the floor as his skin tears and blood flows. Helga gasped, stunned. How can this be? How can condensing a Patronus harm you? Ciel, you must stop. The flames on the silver emblem burned more fiercely. The emblem blistered and the portrait's voice grew thin. Ciel felt power streaming from the emblem into him, nourishing the nascent Patronus. For a moment, a paranoid thought flitted through his mind. Was this some kind of soul-snatching scheme? But nothing felt hollow or forced. Helga had given freely. The wine, and now even the last of her will, poured out for a student she had scarcely met. He took a deep breath. He disliked trouble and risk, but he could not let Helga's sacrifice be wasted. Amid the cracking sounds, he lifted his head, voice steady. Miss Hufflepuff, continue. I can still hold on. Chapter 230, Taking Shape, The Light of Myth. Inside the chamber, silver mist churned like a living thing, as if nurturing something vast and unimaginable. Even Czar, who was forcing it into being, bowed beneath pressure that felt like a mountain. His bones creaked, flesh tore. Is this the cost of using a world tree as a patronus? He thought, teeth clenched. Using a Titan giant as a patronus was already beyond the four founders. The collapse of the world tree had marked the end of the Olympus mythic age. Hephaestus and Demeter had each tried, in their own ways, to recreate it, and failed. That suggested the world tree's level might transcend a normal mythical being. Even a Titan giant, revered as a god, was inferior to it. Czar's struggle made sense in that light. If his legendary life and legendary power had not each already undergone one sublimation, he would probably have been crushed by now. The silver mist showed no sign of easing. If anything, it tightened. Miss Hufflepuff understood that perfectly. She had left Czar her last gift, the Hufflepuff Patronus, and she sent it forward with absolute resolve. The silver light poured toward Czar, growing vibrant and liquid. It flowed into him like nourishment, sharing the burden. As the silver Hufflepuff took on some of the pressure, Czar felt the strain ease slightly. From within the light came her voice, warm and steady despite the thinness of its tone. My will was always meant to be passed to you children. My departure was predetermined. Focus, child. The importance of a mythical patronus is not solely about the limits of magic. The whole magical world may need this. You are our last hope. Czar heard the worry beneath her words. A founder from 1,000 years ago, pessimistic about the future. This weighed on him, but there was no time for reflection. The silver mist continued to tighten. Czar's hands felt as though they supported a mountain. Every second felt like flesh tearing and regenerating. On his system panel, above the blurred label Patronus Charm, colored lights flowed and churned. Elsewhere, Quirrell opened a briefcase in a dim room. Deep steps led to cages where he had once kept many of the so-called five-legged beasts, creatures warped from wizards. Most of the human corpses inside had been consumed. Only a smaller number of monsters remained. The malice and alien magic radiating from them made the blood chill. Worst were the ones still wearing tattered Auror uniforms, transformed Aurors who retained training and battle instinct. They might be more dangerous than ordinary five-legged beasts. Quirrell tossed a human femur into a cage. Violent commotion followed, then the wet sounds of chewing. He nodded with satisfaction. These abominations would not be enough on their own to stop Dumbledore, but if he dispersed them through the school, especially while the students were in the Forbidden Forest for their exams, they would tie down almost every professor, perhaps even Dumbledore himself. While the staff fought the beasts, Quirrell could take the Philosopher's Stone unhindered. How many children would be killed, maimed, or traumatized didn't concern him. To Quirrell, whether wizard or muggle, they were food. He still bore a personal grudge toward Czar, the boy who disgusted him. Wrapping a gruesome scrap of flesh in a newspaper with Czar's picture, he threw it into a cage. If you see this little wizard in the Forbidden Forest, he croaked, spare nothing, kill him. Days passed. The silver mist at Czar's wand tip had entered its final stage. Where it had been scattered and ethereal, it was now gathering into a silvery white mass, almost solid. Miss Hufflepuff's strained voice urged him, hold on, Czar. This is the last step. The silver Hufflepuff no longer looked like a gentle founder. It had become a burning mass of light, reduced in brightness and bulk to an ember, a wisp threatening to go out. Czar himself looked as battered as when he'd fought a kraken at the sea. White bones showed through skin. Cracks spidered across him, like a porcelain figure about to shatter. Legendary life did its best to repair him, but the cost far outstripped the restoration. Then the pressure spiked. The nascent World Tree Patronus sent a surge down that drove despair through Miss Hufflepuff's voice. Czar, perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps a human body truly cannot bear a mythical Patronus. You have done your best. Stop now, or you will die here. The silver light blazed as if burning itself out to shield him. Czar drew a breath. On his panel, the indomitable power trait, an extension of legendary power, flared. The closer he came to collapse, the more indomitable power pushed his strength, even crossing the boundary of a single sublimation. For a brief, terrible moment, his physical might rose as if into a second sublimation. Even the great North Sea Kraken would tremble against such force. With a low, defiant roar, Tsar forced himself upright, refusing the Patronus's pressure. The sound made Miss Hufflepuff cry out. Centuries of memory flooded back. In the Founder's Day, Hogwarts faced foes no modern wizard could imagine, giants and other colossi. Very few beings in her memory had displayed physical might like Tsar's. How high must his Titan giant bloodline be? Hope, fragile but real, rekindled in her heart. As Tsar straightened, the silver mist accelerated its condensation, the scattered vapor forming colossal outlines. But then the light Miss Hufflepuff had been burning to feed the Patronus flickered and scattered, like a candle caught by wind. Her supply dwindled to nothing. The colossal outline that had nearly formed slowed and trembled. In a voice tinged with reproach and sorrow, she said, "Just a little short. Just the very last bit. I cannot squeeze out more." She felt ashamed for making this child suffer for naught. Tsar watched the dying light and realized the truth. Without more power, the near-formed Patronus would collapse back into mist. He could not accept defeat. "Power," he whispered, cold and sharp. "I need a little more. Even the smallest boost will do, just enough to take this step." An idea flashed to him, the guardian trees in the little greenhouse. After Dumbledore's Phoenix Patronus had lingered there, the trees had grown a reward type, a silver-level Patronus charm boost. If the guardian trees were mature, maybe he could harvest that to help. He asked, voice hoarse, "Miss Hufflepuff, can you send me to the little greenhouse? Perhaps I still have a way." She did not hesitate. Her silver light, already precarious, flickered fiercely and opened a doorway in the wall. Beyond it lay the little greenhouse, pale and tranquil, where dozens of mature guardian trees hung with heavy reward spheres. Tsar forced himself through the doorway. Every step shredded him further. Blood trailed where he stumbled. But he reached the trees. He did not look at any reward but the silver-level Patronus charm boosts. He reached out, voice an exhausted roar. "Harvest!" Dozens of light spheres surged toward him. Miss Hufflepuff's lingering will winked out, thin and thankful, unable to provide another ounce of power. Her eyes, if such a thing could be said of a fading imprint, held regret and relief. She felt shame for failing, but some consolation in Tsar's stubbornness. What she then saw baffled her. The nascent world tree Patronus that should have collapsed without her power not only held together, it condensed further. The silver-level reward spheres were seeding their power into Tsar, and the Patronus was responding. One sphere after another infused his body. The gap that had remained slowly closed. When the last sphere poured its light into him, Tsar's Patronus charm boost flared into a brilliant golden luster. The final hair's breadth was crossed. Before Tsar and what remained of Miss Hufflepuff's will, a Patronus of stupendous scale took shape, its upper half entirely shrouded in silver mist, only its lowest roots clearly visible. Yet the impression was of something vast enough to be a landscape. Miss Hufflepuff's voice was a whisper of awe. "This is," Tsar glanced at his system panel. The Patronus charm entry still read, "Not yet mastered," but the light washing over the words was unlike anything he'd seen. It was the light of mythical level. When Charles saw the mythical level glow swirling across the system panel, he couldn't help clenching his hand. Ecstasy swelled in his chest. He had never expected his first mythical level ability to come about like this. Strictly speaking, the World Tree Patronus wasn't truly an ability Charles had forged on his own. His current magic wasn't strong enough to cast it without help. The reason he could condense the World Tree now was Madame Hufflepuff's selfless aid. After this, if Charles wanted to summon the World Tree Patronus again, he would have to rely on himself. He was still far from mastering such a mythical level spell, but the hardest step had already been taken. Compared to developing an ability from scratch to mythical level, learning to control a mythical level Patronus would be much easier. Madame Hufflepuff's gift exceeded anything he had imagined. The joy of acquiring the World Tree Patronus was short-lived. Charles' gaze dropped to Madame Hufflepuff's fading Patronus. Now the silver light was no larger than a grain of rice. It was hard to believe it had once been a brilliant, radiant silver form. Even Madame Hufflepuff's voice coming from it had grown ethereal, as if it might dissipate at any second. Charles breathed deeply. Sorrow shaded his features. He had spent only a short time with Madame Hufflepuff, but she had been undeniably selfless. Her generosity made him feel undeserving. In her weakening voice, there was no regret at her own fading, only joy for him. "Child," she said, "your Patronus is the World Tree. This is an achievement worthy of the history of magic. Even among mythical beings, the World Tree ranks higher than the Titans. Not even the 12 chief gods of the Olympian age or the God King can claim the World Tree's status. You will certainly become an extraordinary wizard, one to surpass those recorded in the history of magic." Then, as if to comfort him, Madame Hufflepuff continued, "As for my dissipation, child, you must not be sad. My life ended 1,000 years ago. This Patronus left in the world is only to aid the young students who come after me. Helping you condense the World Tree Patronus was my final task. Do not dwell on sorrow. There are other things I must tell you before I go." She surprised him then. Talent in magic is not an unsolvable problem. There is a very valuable potion that can raise one's innate talent. Your Professor Sprout, the current Hufflepuff head, came here once and took the last ancient herb. I think she is gathering the ingredients for that talent-enhancing potion for you. She didn't tell you because she feared raising your hopes only to disappoint you. Charles' heart trembled. Professor Pomona Sprout had been collecting ingredients for him to brew such a potion? Madame Hufflepuff called it extremely precious. Collecting those ingredients in this age would be nearly impossible. Even as a herbology master and house head, the price Sprout paid would be enormous. Charles tightened his fist and hardened his resolve. He might not be able to repay her now, but he could at least make sure Hufflepuff House won this year's House Cup. And Antonin Dolohov, Sprout's foe, the butcher who had driven her to anger, Charles' heart had already pronounced a death sentence on him. He would pay for the harm he'd done. Madame Hufflepuff's tone shifted to solemnity, even fear, as she emphasized one thing: the International Statute of Secrecy. Charles, when you have the ability, if anyone seeks to overturn the statute, whether that dark wizard Voldemort, someone else, or even your headmaster Dumbledore, you must stop them. Otherwise, the magical world will face catastrophe. Charles was bewildered. He'd taken history of magic and knew the statute, drafted in 1689 and established in 1692 to hide wizards from muggles. But why would Madame Hufflepuff, one of Hogwarts's 4 founders, stress it so fervently? She did not explain. Her voice trembled. "I cannot tell you the reason. Unless your occlumency reaches the pinnacle of a wizard, the more you know, the more danger you invite. 1,000 years ago, we established Hogwarts because a powerful enemy was upon us. Wizards were like candles in the wind, their fate flickering. Our actions were meant to hide and leave a spark for the magical world. Years have passed. The magical world has grown from near extinction to flourishing. But the enemy that forced those wizards to hide has grown far beyond imagination. If the statute had not been passed in time, if our existence had been revealed to muggles, the magical world might not exist today. What protects us is not a single genius, it is this law. Many self-important wizards do not understand that. If they try to overturn the statute, enslave muggles, or call muggle attention to us, disaster will follow. Unless you can rival the titans of old, you must uphold the statute." There was fear in her voice, fear enough to startle Charles. The enemy she spoke of made a witch who had stood at the peak of magical power in her prime, who the system rated as likely ascended 3 times, feel terror. And she credited the continued existence and prosperity of the magical world to the statute itself. Charles could only imagine what kind of threat would inspire such a warning. He did not press for details. As Madame Hufflepuff had said, when strength is lacking, the less one knows, the safer one is. Perhaps when his strength reached a certain level, the rest would reveal itself. Hearing him accept her words, the Patronus's voice softened into relief. "Yes, that's good. We students must remember one thing: stay low-key and diligent. Before you have enough strength, never seek the limelight. Ordinary people are the happiest." The tiny rice-sized silver light finally scattered into stardust, floating like fireflies before fading into the soil of the greenhouse. Wait, one last thing," Madame Hufflepuff called, as her voice thinned further. "I once asked the goblins to help forge a golden cup. At the time, I pillaged many precious metals. With the goblins' nature, they must have hoarded some. If you need them and you have the ability to subdue the goblins, you can collect that debt. It's all my money." Her words cut off as the last particles dissolved. Madame Hufflepuff was gone. Charles stood in the little greenhouse, a mix of wistfulness and resolve on his face. He etched her words into his heart, especially the hint about the precious metals. He had thought repairing the Demeter silver cup impossible. Many of the materials Sirius had mentioned were extinct. But now there might be a path. The metals used to forge Hufflepuff's golden cup likely overlapped with what Sirius had described. If he could find them, repairing the Demeter cup might be feasible. A firm thought formed in him. Madame Hufflepuff's golden cup must be returned to its rightful owner. How could an heirloom of Hufflepuff House, the last relic of Madame Hufflepuff in the human world, be defiled by a noseless monster's soul fragment? Consider it repayment for her generosity. If he had the chance, he would retrieve it. He drew a deep breath, shedding the sorrow of loss. The dead had passed, the living must press on. His eyes found the Patronus glow on the system panel, the mythical level light, and eagerness glinted there. Although he was far from being able to summon the World Tree Patronus reliably, mythical level abilities should still have effects he could access. "Let's try," he murmured. With a solemn expression, he raised his wand. Expecto Patronum. The incantation felt like lifting a mountain. His wand had never felt so heavy. It was all he could do to hold it. If his wand weren't ash, one of the toughest woods, and if the World Tree legend linking ash wood to his Patronus weren't true, he suspected the wand might have snapped under the strain. The powerful pressure he had felt during the condensation returned, tearing at recently healed flesh and bursting capillaries into a spray of blood. Darkness crept at the edges of his vision. His head throbbed as if his spirit were being drained. He nearly collapsed. The Patronus he forced out at such cost was pitiful compared to the condensed world tree he had witnessed. A single wisp of silver smoke, thinner than a hair, drifted from the tip of his wand. Yet its substance felt different, less like smoke and more like a silver thread. Though it lasted only a few seconds before dissipating, Charles could tell the difference. Still, he couldn't help the sting of disappointment. All that pain for a wisp of silver, and to last mere seconds. He managed a bitter smile. How difficult would it be to summon a full World Tree Patronus? It would probably require legendary life magic strength to have any real hope. He glanced at the system panel. His magic strength hovered just shy of platinum. He shook his head. Improving the Margaret attribute has to be a priority. He muttered, "At this rate, I won't meet the requirements by the final battle in the original plot." His frustration faded when he noticed other changes on the system panel. The harvest from the Guardian Tree had yielded welcome results. His dark arts resistance, boosted by dozens of reward light orbs, had been raised to platinum. His magic perception picked up new sacred particles within his magic, particles that would weaken dark arts when he was targeted. That extra layer of protection would make many dark wizards despair at facing him, perhaps more than confronting a Cerberus. His legendary life had already made his health bar terrifyingly thick. Now he wouldn't take every magical hit outright. His occlumency enhancement had also brightened to a platinum glow. It had already helped him greatly, and Madame Hufflepuff's warning about preserving certain secrets had reinforced its importance. Under enhancement, his occlumency now edged closer to diamond grade. It saved him a great deal of effort. But the thing that surprised him most was a clear diamond grade glow on one ability. Defense against the Dark Arts Comprehension. Chapter 232. Epiphany. Life and Death. The Beginning of the Trial. Diamond grade defense against the Dark Arts Epiphany. Charles' eyes shone with surprise. He had half expected that a cluster of reward orbs, many platinum and perhaps a few diamond, could push this reward to diamond grade, but seeing it for himself still made him breathe a small sigh of relief. He had felt the gulf between diamond and platinum before, but when he read the reward title, Defense Against the Dark Arts, he frowned. He felt no obvious change. The system panel showed no new gleam in his abilities. How exactly would a diamond grade reward manifest? Just then a prompt appeared on the panel. Do you wish to begin receiving the Defense Against the Dark Arts Epiphany, diamond grade? He'd received epiphanies before, even for ancient weather magic, but he'd never seen a prompt like this. Why was this different? After a moment's hesitation, he accepted. It was diamond grade. He wasn't about to refuse on principle. The world spun. When Charles could focus again, he found himself standing in a forest. His pupils narrowed. He'd half expected a portkey or apparition, but something was wrong. The lighting and sky didn't match the scenery. He also couldn't see the system panel. The system had never glitched like that. Only one explanation fit. This is a virtual reality-like projection. From the gloom around him, a malicious aura rose. Pairs of eyes glinted in the dark. When he made out the shapes, his expression shifted. An acromantula colony, 20, maybe 30 of the beasts, loomed among the trees. In the magical world, such numbers would normally only appear in the Forbidden Forest at Hogwarts, and he had already put that population down once. Yet here they were, stalking him. So this was the system's method for the defense against the dark arts epiphany. Gradually, Charles understood. Defense against the dark arts wasn't a single spell, but a body of techniques, ways to defend against dark wizards, dark creatures, and other dark arts. It required targeted knowledge and, crucially, practical experience. Practical experience couldn't be handed over verbatim like a lecture. It had to be lived, adapted. The system had given him an arena to practice. He also noticed another thing. His physical attributes were suppressed. His life and power felt reduced, only at about diamond grade, vastly lower than the legendary life and power he'd grown used to. Everything else seemed unchanged. Even the Serpensortia that the cursed jewel had temporarily boosted to diamond grade remained at that level. The implication was clear. In this epiphany, he could use abilities only up to diamond grade. A trace of eagerness flashed through him. This was the first time he'd faced combat with his physical strength deliberately limited. For so long, he'd relied on legendary life and legendary power like a suit of indestructible armor. It had meant he never experienced true peril, not the kind that quickened the blood and forced instant, razor-sharp decisions. That complacency was dangerous. If he met an enemy who could neutralize those trump cards, he'd be in trouble. Now, stripped of that safety net, his senses sharpened. Magic within him stirred with raw will. Don't die. That instinct made his magic perception keener, his reactions faster. Instinctively, he leapt aside just as a sticky web whistled past where he'd been. An acromantula had circled behind him and fired. If he'd still been using his full augmented strength, the web would have been nothing. Suppressed to diamond grade, getting ensnared could be disastrous. Even if this was an illusion, he didn't want to be killed by it. He spun, wand like a blade. Sectum Sempra. The platinum-grade Sectum Sempra sprang free, an invisible cutting force slashing at the spider. The acromantula's flesh split open. It crashed, thrashing, but its terrible eyes still fixed on him. If given a moment, it would crawl back up and rush him. The other spiders didn't flinch. In their gaze, there was only killing intent. Charles' nerves tensed. This was no practice. This was life or death. He couldn't afford mistakes. He emptied himself into the fight, casting without hesitation, each spell aimed and precise. For several minutes, he danced on the edge of danger. When the scene dissolved, he was back in the little greenhouse, pale and gasping, half kneeling and clutching his chest. In the illusion, an acromantula had bitten him, venom had pierced his chest. He still felt the searing pain, numbness, the imagined sensation of his insides melting, that choking fear as the colony closed in to devour him. It took him a full half hour to steady his breathing and shake off the afterimage of dying. A bitter, chastening thought rose within him. He had once thought his combat experience was sufficient. He'd faced trolls, giant priests, even the North Sea Kraken. But all of that had been possible because he'd carried legendary life and legendary power as a failsafe. Reduce those to diamond grade, and even an acromantula colony could bring him to the brink. He compared himself in his mind to the figures from his previous life. Voldemort, who had relied on Horcruxes and when stripped of them, revealed fragility and rage. Dumbledore, who met death calmly and used it to further his plans. Charles did not want such a hidden weakness to exist in him. He already held responsibilities he could not betray. The Sprout family, Snape's fate, the trust of his classmates, even the debts of Madame Hufflepuff. He had to be stronger in ways that didn't hinge on a single invulnerable armor. System, he said aloud. Defense against the dark arts comprehension. Continue receiving. The illusion struck again. This time he had essentially no time to adapt. The spiders leapt and webbed almost at once. Charles moved on pure reflex, dancing on the edge of death, feeling it like cold steel against his skin. Then he let the runes at the tip of his tongue and wand flow. Fehu, Thurasaz, Dagaz, D.M. Silver-grayed ancient weather magic flared at his wand tip, transforming into streaks of electric light. It tore through the canopy and drew down a bolt from the sky. Lightning crashed into the dark, shredding the immediate threat. Back in the little greenhouse a few minutes later, he jerked his head, breathing hard. That time the attack had been a sneaky ambush from beneath a companion's corpse. He'd let his guard drop after casting. Lesson learned: always check bodies on a battlefield, and never relax immediately after casting a big spell. 2 death experiences had already done something to him. His magic perception hadn't increased numerically, but his magic had become more active, more closely tied to him, quicker, more instinctive. Life or death combat honed a wizard like nothing else. He thought of the original novel again, how Harry, Ron, and Hermione grew in strength through constant danger, how the long First Wizarding War had made many wizards brutally effective. No one would willingly repeat such trials, but with the system he could ingest multiple realistic combats without risking his real life. According to the barely perceptibly blurred Defense Against the Dark Arts comprehension text on his panel, he could enter many more times, likely more than 10. Charles tempted himself for a moment, hungry to continue. But he paused. He'd just done 2 full bouts, and the insights weren't yet fully digested. Rushing through the rest would be wasting the reward. Besides, he suddenly realized the timing. It had only been 5 or 6 days since he condensed the World Tree Patronus with Madame Hufflepuff's help. The Forbidden Forest exam for Defense Against the Dark Arts had to be today. He could already hear the commotion from the direction of the forest. It was starting. Charles left the little greenhouse and hurried to the edge of the Forbidden Forest. Students from all 4 houses were gathered, tense and nervous in the assembly area. Even Gryffindors, who prided themselves on bravery, looked pale facing that dark maw. Some seemed convinced a man-eating monster waited within. In a separate entrance, a short distance away, Harry, Hermione, and Ron stood together. They had been assigned to patrol the Forbidden Forest as punishment earlier, so they would enter from this side rather than with the main group. Harry and Hermione looked anxious. They were few in number, and the forest's darkness pressed at them. Ron, though, brimmed with excitement and impatience. His confidence had been growing, his dreams had brought him closer to that mysterious temple, and each awakening had sharpened his magic. Only yesterday he'd gained a powerful charm from the temple. He was determined to show off. Rumors said strong performance here could win many House Cup points and even a spot in the Daily Prophet. Seeing Charles had not yet appeared, Ron's impatience turned to scorn. He snorted about Hufflepuffs, about cowardice, about Charles specifically. "You think he's scared, do you? Not coming?" Ron jeered. "Hufflepuff's full of cowards. Bet half those little Hufflepuffs will cry when they go in. Look at Charles." Hermione cut him off sharp. "Ron, stop talking." He blinked in surprise. "Why? What did I say wrong?" Then Ron turned his head and saw Charles approaching. Charles' gaze met him, cold and hard as a drawn blade. Chapter 233. The map unfolds. The dagger appears. Slaughter. Ron spun around. What met his eyes was Ciel's cold, knife-sharp stare. The moment their gazes locked, Ron felt his chest tighten, as if gripped by a cold hand. His earlier swagger evaporated. All that remained was a raw, animal fear. The magic he'd picked up in that temple had been useful, but his real combat experience? Sparring resentfully with Slytherin first years at best. A scratch or a bit of blood had always been a catastrophe. He had nothing on the trials scrang. Ciel had survived, especially the 2 life-and-death struggles in that illusion. They weren't comparable. Even now, the lingering killing intent in Ciel's eyes made Ron feel certain he would be dead the next second. Instinctively, he took 2 stumbling steps back, nearly falling. When he caught himself, his face twisted into a venomous sneer. "You," he spat, gripping his wand so hard his knuckles whitened. Anger he'd kept buried for so long surged up. He raised his wand tip. Magic began to flow into it. His lips moved, preparing the spell he had learned in the temple. With that spell, he could knock Ciel flat. Ciel narrowed his eyes. Ron's subtle movements had not escaped him. A cold light flashed across Ciel's face. Earlier, Dumbledore had asked him to watch over the hairy trio in the Forbidden Forest, but the one he really needed to protect was the chosen child, Harry. Ron was merely an accessory. Survival was sufficient. Losing a hand or foot as a lesson might be acceptable. The silent tension was broken by a figure hurrying out of the trees. Dumbledore himself had appeared. Ron's raised wand dropped halfway. He forced a casual, inward snort. This time, Ciel had lucked out. Otherwise, he would already have been knocked to the ground. But once they were deeper in the forest, Ciel wouldn't be so lucky if he dared to look at him like that again. Ron felt a murderous heat in his chest at the thought. Dumbledore did not have time to probe what these first years were thinking. He was full of confusion. Quirrell had wanted a practical assessment carried out at the edge of the Forbidden Forest. By momentum and persuasion, he had gotten consent from the staff and the students' parents. Even Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts, could hardly interfere with the Defense Against the Dark Arts final now. On safety grounds, he had sent several heads of house to inspect each house's route, but they'd found nothing. The path Ciel and Harry were to take was different in form from the others, but similar in substance. A set of challenges matching their defense lessons, a chance to collect low-level materials, and a final token to mark completion. It looked like a neatly designed practical exam. If Quirrell hadn't been Quirrell, Dumbledore would have been inclined to praise the creativity of the test. But now Dumbledore had no idea which part of it was dangerous. The unknown gnawed at him. He fixed his gaze on Ciel. Perhaps the outstanding young wizard could help protect Harry. Hopefully no major trouble would arise. Ciel's face showed no sign of concern. Dumbledore's earlier Patronus charm had raised the bounty his guardian tree offered. He could spare a hand, but he wasn't going to be a babysitter. He would not throw himself into needless danger for others unless he could actually help. Dozens of guardian trees were not worth his life. Dumbledore went on to explain the exam. The students were to pass through the Forbidden Forest, collect materials, face some dark dangers along the way, and reach the marker. When he added, almost casually, that the top 3 would each earn 50 points for their houses, every face in the Harry trio lit up. They'd each lost 50 points for Gryffindor recently. 50 points now could wipe that slate clean. Even if they didn't win first, second place would be a major gain. Hermione's tension eased a fraction. No one could call off the assessment now. The Ministry, the Daily Prophet, and the parents were all watching. A bell echoed at the boundary of the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore looked solemnly at Ciel and Harry. "The assessment begins," he said. "Children, be careful." Ron nodded with barely disguised eagerness and strode off. Harry and Hermione exchanged glances and followed immediately. Ciel walked in more slowly under Dumbledore's gaze. From the edge of the trees, Dumbledore's worry was visible. The 4 house heads arrived as well. Dumbledore's eyes scanned them, silently asking if they'd found anything. Each dean shook their head grimly. Frustration rolled through the staff. This felt uncomfortable, like being baited into a trap. These were the same uneasy feelings Quirrell must have had when he'd arranged the Philosopher's Stone trials. Quirrell himself arrived then, wearing a smile stripped of any feigned stutter. He chuckled, almost gleeful. "I think this will make a most unforgettable final exam," he said, and watched the forest as if waiting for a spectacle. Inside the trees, Ron led Harry and Hermione at a fast clip. Hermione glanced back and noticed Ciel's figure trailing, getting smaller. "Ron," she urged, "slow down. Ciel hasn't caught up. We shouldn't go on alone. The forest is dangerous." Ron snorted. "Wait for him?" he scoffed. "He's the one who slowed us down, remember? Dumbledore said the top 3 get 50 points. Have you forgotten who's to blame for our losing so many points? If it weren't for that—" His voice tightened. "We can't throw away this chance so someone else can drag us down." Hermione's head dropped. She didn't want Gryffindor to be last either. Ron's fervor convinced her. "We have to get ahead," he snapped, and didn't look back. Harry paused, then tried to rationalize it. "It might be safer for Ciel to be alone at the back," he said. "If there's danger, we'll be the first to face it. We can't miss this chance." Hermione and Harry quickened their pace to catch up to Ron. Shia watched their retreating figures with no visible reaction. He had said before he would help as convenience allowed, not go out of his way. Besides, they were still very close to the forest's entrance. Dumbledore and the staff could respond quickly. Whatever the two-faced man, Quirrell, had planned, he wouldn't trigger it this close to the edge. Shiar strolled deeper into the trees at an unhurried pace. The outskirts of the Forbidden Forest were like his backyard. Darkness that would terrify most children was clear daylight to him. But even so, his enhanced sixth sense kept whispering that something was wrong. Dumbledore had just inspected the route, and the deans had checked other paths. How could Quirrell have left no trace? Could the route have been altered after inspection? There wasn't time, and the deans would notice. Shia shook his head. Forget it, he told himself. If I can't figure it out now, I'll take it step by step. He turned to catch up, but his spiritual eye, his sixth sense, twinged again. He had missed something. He retraced his steps to the spot where he'd paused and scanned the ground, every twig, shrub, blade of grass. Then a small, peculiar plant caught his eye. He froze with surprise. Mousetail grass. In his mind, quick facts popped up. Mousetail grass was a rare magical herb. It lay flat on the ground like a mouse's tail rather than standing upright. It could dampen one's presence and hide one's aura. It was used in invisibility potions and could strengthen invisibility cloaks when woven into fabric. He crouched and gathered the clump of grass. A system prompt blinked in his perception. You discovered mousetail grass. Cultivate it to maturity to receive the reward. Magic concealment, bronze level. The discovery was useful. Magic concealment would be practical now that he couldn't rely on Harry's invisibility cloak. But Shia wasn't focused on the herb. A growing sense of dissonance prickled at him. He dug his fingers into the soil out of habit. Years of farming had made him instinctive about ground moisture. The topsoil should be dry. There had been no rain. Tree cover slowed evaporation, but the surface should still be parched. Instead, the soil was damp near the surface. Mousetail grass normally crept in deep, dark, moist soil, not on the surface. One inconsistency after another snapped into place. The most likely explanation was ugly and clever. Someone had dug up the deeper, moister earth and refilled the pit with it, making the surface look normal from a cursory inspection. That would explain why Dumbledore and the deans, wizards used to testing for magical signatures, found nothing. The trick wasn't magical, it was physical. Shia pupils shrank. If so, the whole area had been a diversion. Quirrell didn't care about the token collecting or the students' materials. He only needed them in the exact place at the exact time. The real trial ground lay underground, buried beneath a layer of refilled earth. Shia straightened to leave and expose the plot. Then the ground shuddered. First came a tremor like an earthquake, then a towering plume of dust from below. The forbidden forest bucked, trees swayed and snapped. The earth under Shia feet collapsed, sinking at a horrifying speed. He stared up as the world tilted. He could have used a simple levitation charm to lift himself free, but he couldn't. He saw panicked young faces above, students who had admired him, who had supported him. He thought of his aunt. He thought of Professor Sprout and her silver Patronus. Shia drew his wand and steadied his gaze. He did not move to save himself. I can leave myself, he murmured, but Hufflepuff must not lose anyone. The ground swallowed him. Above, the students in Hogwarts corridors heard the rumble and poured out. Where the trees had been was now a vast black hole, an abyss gaping into the earth. Faint hysterical voices drifted up from the void, and beneath them a chorus of low, excited growls. Dumbledore and the heads of house drew wands at once. The mantle of authority and battle experience snapped on. They pointed their wands at Quirrell, standing near the lip of the sinkhole. Dumbledore's face carried an unfamiliar and deadly anger. "Quirinus Quirrell," Dumbledore said, "what have you done?" Quirrell's expression went suddenly pale, as if facing a vast sea or the sky, a feeling of being utterly small washing over him. Then he laughed. Loud, unhinged laughter, and his cloak slipped. His form grew grotesquely, inhumanly large. Red fur sprouted over him. Pale limbs multiplied, 10 of them, writhing. A second head, unnatural and slick, extended. The face on that head, everyone but Dumbledore knew it at once. "Dark Lord," someone breathed. "You know who." They had always been a two-faced man sharing one body in the old tale. Now the mask came off. Quirrell wasn't just wearing the Dark Lord, he was a fused monstrosity. 2 elongated heads, countless limbs, a creature more horrific than the memory of Quirrell ever was. The staff backed away. Only Dumbledore's feet stayed planted. Snape and the others fell back 10 paces, eyes wide with the expression of men who had faced old terrors anew. Quirrell laughed until his sides shook. "No more pretending," he crowed. "I'm tired of the pretense. Dumbledore, colleagues, aren't you surprised? Aren't you pleased?" On the other head, Lord Voldemort's face was triumph incarnate, eyes coldly fixed on Dumbledore. He mocked, venomous and amused. "Dumbledore, old fool, you didn't expect this, did you? After 11 years, I return. You might be surprised I have regained so much power." Dumbledore raised the Elder Wand slowly. Terrifying, concentrated magic gathered on its tip, as if the wand itself were brewing an apocalypse. For a moment, Voldemort's laughter ceased. Then the monster's extra limbs brandished wands of their own. The unforgivable green light stabbed out. Voldemort's voice purred. "You can fight me now, Dumbledore. You can abuse your power. But how long will it take to stop me? My power is not at its peak, but this body is hard to kill. Those children who have fallen may not survive long. How many lives will you trade to send me away?" He toyed with the wand between pale fingers. His words thudded like a hammer. Even Dumbledore's voice trembled. "What have you done?" he asked. Voldemort laughed, a cold, cruel thing. "Do you remember the disappearances? The monsters that caused them? I left 12, 13, maybe 15 of those 5-limbed beasts under that pit. They ate yesterday. They sampled a thigh each. Imagine how they'll welcome so many sweet-spirited children." Professor Sprout, Shia Er's aunt, went as pale as paper. Her eyes filled with a horror worse than death, the image of her niece mangled and missing limbs. A green curse shrieked out, and Snape, ever watchful, yanked her aside. The spell slammed into the air where she had been standing. Voldemort shrugged, playfully cruel. The huge, distorted body lunged toward Hogwarts, screeching and mocking as it moved. "Dumbledore, I suggest you hurry. You love setting traps that slow me, don't you? I'll teach you some lessons in puzzle design. Potions, herbology, transfiguration. You'd better be quick clearing levels, or there'll be more casualties than Shia. If you clear them, perhaps you'll save some in good shape. Or open the way and give me the stone. I'll save you some." As the monster's laughter trailed off, Professor Sprout screamed and sprinted for the forest, wand in hand, slipping past stunned staff. Snape followed, wrenching his robes and cursing. Dumbledore flung his wand, and a wall of roaring blue-white fire cleared a corridor through darkness. He plunged after them. Guilt burned in Dumbledore's heart. He had trusted Quirrell, had hoped to use him to harden Harry. If he had suspected this, none of this would have happened. Now his only desperate hope was that Shia had survived. Below the surface, Shia did not know the chaos above. He peered into a black world lit by his platinum-grade night vision. The underground space mirrored the forbidden forest above, an underworld of trees and gloom, but every breath in the air felt wrong, poisoned with malice. Far off, unearthly roars answered each other. Something moved among the trunks. Branches shivered, and a sound like tearing fabric reached him. A monster stepped into view, a hideous creature with crimson fur, 5 human-like limbs, a long neck ending in a head, one of those 5-limbed beasts Shia had seen on Duraria Isle. 5-limbed beast, he breathed, but he checked himself. This one felt off. The aura wasn't the full, adult, genuine evil he remembered. He saw ragged scraps of wizard robes adhered to the thing's fur. Understanding struck. These are wizards, kidnapped and modified, he realized. Quirrell turned them into 5-limbed Barrows, beast-like monsters. The head twisted and its eyes lit when it saw Shia. The creature recognized the target Quirrell had singled out. A wet, slavering laugh crawled from its throat. "Little, meat!" It charged. Shia's palm tightened on his wand. The first time he had faced a 5-limbed beast on Duraria Isle, the pressure of their magic had nearly crushed him. He had learned caution, but he was no longer the same boy. Experience had hardened him. The wand flashed. An invisible, enormous hand seized the charging beast. An instinctive, practiced charm, and for a heartbeat, the creature hung stunned, airborne. Shia struck with Sectum Sempra, over and over along the neck. Flesh tore, the head reared and fell, eyes closing. For a moment it seemed dead. Then the severed head flopped like a grotesque flying creature and lunged again with a mirthless laugh, certain it could still win. Shiar's wand sizzled as he channeled a crackling electric charm. Lightning engulfed the head. When the light faded, the thing was utterly still and cold. He let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. Killing a modified five-limbed beast cleanly was no easy thing. He allowed himself a small, hard smile. "I've grown," he told the dark trees. His gaze fell on the wound blood. It looked wrong, and then suddenly perfect, just like the five-limbed beast blood he'd obtained on Doraria Isle. A jolt of excitement lit him. That blood could induce mutant-faced glowing mushrooms to sprout, which, burned the right way, produced ancient ash, an accelerant for ancient plants. He'd run out of five-limbed beast blood months ago. Doraria was too dangerous to revisit. He hadn't expected to find this here, in Quirrell's trap. His mind raced. If he could harvest all the five-limbed beasts here, how much blood could he collect? How many mushrooms could he cultivate? How much ancient ash could he produce? His research on ancient flora could leap forward. His breathing grew rapid. The underground forest seemed like a treasure pit full of rare resources. If only the beasts were dense enough. He worried that by the time he gathered enough blood, Dumbledore and the others would have arrived and cut off his opportunity. An idea struck. He flicked his wand, and a thin, precise, laser-like charm sliced the skin on his wrist. Blood welled, and the rich scent of it spread, sharp, vital. He raised his wand, and with a concentrated beam that burned through the gloom, he etched glowing letters in the air above him, clear, defiantly visible. "I am Shiar," the beam spelled. "I am here. Don't you monsters want to eat me? Come." Whether it was his blood or the flashing words, the sounds that had been only faint moments before swelled into a chorus. Footsteps, growls, and the rustle of massed bodies converged toward Shiar. He braced, wand steady, eyes bright with resolve. Hunger and opportunity were coming to meet him. Chapter 234, Faith, Apprentices, and Heads. As Shiar Sprout cast the laser spell into the air, bright letters formed against the ceiling of the underground forbidden forest, drawing the five-legged beasts toward him. Far above ground, the professors racing to the location saw the faint glow through the trees. Professor McGonagall's eyes were rimmed with red. "Shiar," she whispered. "This child." Professor Flitwick, usually the most restrained, was close to tears. What a brave, good child. He exposed himself to lead the monsters away to protect the other students. May Merlin bless him. Snape's face went hard as iron. His lips pressed together so tightly he'd bitten them. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Only he seemed to understand how much power Shiar Sprout had been hiding. A body that seemed nearly indestructible, formidable, a clumency, battle experience far beyond his years, and ancient magic to call on. If Shiar had wanted to hide, Snape believed he could probably have survived until rescued, but by deliberately exposing himself, by drawing monsters to him, his chances plummeted. Snape cursed under his breath. "Idiot, you fool." Professor Sprout's color had drained from her face. Seeing her pupil deliberately attract monsters, she looked as though she might sink into an abyss. Her voice was roughened by anger and fear. "Dumbledore, if anything happens to my Shiar because of your decision, I can't promise what I'll do." Dumbledore's face went pale at the fury and despair in her tone. He could imagine nothing worse than a loved one, returned from death only to be taken again. His eyes, reflecting the flickering words in the forest above, shone with a pained respect. "Shiar Sprout," he said softly, "you are the finest student I have ever seen, inheriting Hufflepuff's diligence and Gryffindor's courage. If there is even a sliver of hope, I will not let you die before my eyes." Hold on. Below, the students in the underground forest felt the laser spell words even more keenly. Behind a thick trunk, two Ravenclaws huddled together, trembling so badly they dared not breathe. A reddish, furred monster prowled nearby, its long, eerie head sniffing the shadows. Every strange laugh or low inhalation felt like a death knell. Their cuts and scrapes burned. The scent of their blood seemed to draw the creature closer. When they could no longer stand the terror, they screamed, and then watched, stunned, as the five-legged beast abruptly fled. Only then did they notice the luminous letters above. Relief crashed into shock, gratitude, and shame. "Shiar, he drew it away. He saved us," the two Ravenclaws murmured. recalling their vague condescension toward Hufflepuff over the last year with fresh embarrassment. They crawled deeper into the shadows and fixed their gaze on the spell writings, humbled. Around them, students who had been spared by Shia-Ur's diversion felt the same mixture of awe and dependence. Even those who had not faced the beasts heard strange laughter and malevolent magic scudding through the trees. In that darkness, Shia-Ur's spell became dawn, an emblem of hope, and every student in the underground forest silently prayed to him. Shia-Ur Sprout felt the change in the air. A peculiar warmth rose in him. He had felt this before, when trolls had worshipped him, or after leading the Hufflepuff Quidditch team to a long-awaited victory. But this was far stronger. His glabella tingled as the spiritual eye, sharpened by his advancing occlumency and sixth sense, opened. Lines and chaotic colors overlaid the world. The forest took on black and blood-red hues that pressed on his mind. Threading through that madness, however, were pure white strands, reaching toward him. This is faith, he thought. Dense, pure faith. He understood immediately. He had never before received such a concentrated flow of faith from other students. Admirers and respect were one thing, but genuine, desperate belief was another, something rarely granted by so many minds at once. In dire moments, those prayers reached farther than idle praise. Shia-Ur smiled a little. This surge of faith was worth as much as all he had gathered before. If the Demeter silver cup absorbed it, the ritual magic he just used would cool and recover quickly. Whether to ripen other plants with ritual magic, or to combine it with five-legged beast blood to force the mutant mandrake glow fungus to mature for ancient ash, this faith was an opportunity to grow his strength fast. No matter how the Forbidden Forest trial had been disrupted, there was benefit in the change. His mood brightened again, though he reminded himself to stay cautious. He had legendary power and legendary life hidden for true emergencies. There was no need to unleash them unnecessarily and draw everyone's attention. Shia-Ur's wand moved over the modified corpse before him, steadily siphoning the remaining blood into a bottle. As he drew it, he examined the mutilated body more closely. What he discovered made his scalp prickle. The monster's core magic was weak, far weaker than its appearance suggested. He checked again and came to the same conclusion. This had most likely been a low-level dark wizard apprentice from Nocturne Alley, someone who might never even have studied at Hogwarts. Such apprentices, squibs or marginal wizards desperate for work, were sometimes used as free labor or experimental subjects by darker practitioners. This one had been modified into a five-legged beast. The most shocking detail, however, was how much stronger the creature had become after Lord Voldemort's black magic transformation. A wizard who could be defeated by a first year had been turned into a being rivaling monsters 5 times its original level. Voldemort's transformations pushed decay into dreadful power. Shia-Ur recalled Dumbledore's admission in the original history. Voldemort had driven many branches of magic to obscene extremes. In a previous letter, the Dark Lord had suggested combining creature blood with his black magic transformation to shatter talent limits and gain immense strength. The thought of power built that way was dreadfully plausible. Shia-Ur Sprout shook his head. If he lacked the system that let him advance naturally, he might have been tempted by that shortcut too. But he now had the chance to rise toward mythical level without becoming something neither human nor monster. Still, he recognized the utility of the dark arts, especially as a means of modifying plants. The transformed corpse before him was a treasure trove of techniques that would drive many to obsession. He was not arrogant enough to dismiss it. Delving into the modification signatures, he felt a chill. The corpse contained not 1 or 2, but 6 distinct magics balanced in a precise, hateful harmony, the apprentice's own magic and 5 transplanted wizardly essences. That balance had multiplied the creature's power to levels ordinary wizards couldn't match. 6 types of magic, in equilibrium, he muttered. How did they achieve that? A strange light flashed in his eyes. If he could grasp the principles here, perhaps he could finally solve the blue star flower's cultivation problem. Last time he'd raised Demeter ritual magic to bronze, the Demeter silver cup gained the ability to bless a seed, an invaluable boon. If he could push Demeter to silver, what new aid might the cup offer? His system panel had already hinted at progress. The sudden outpouring of faith had left a stronger mark than anything before. The bronze sheen of Demeter ritual magic had brightened with flecks of silver. He understood at that moment why rituals and priestly invocation were tied to advancement. Believers' most devout prayers came in moments of utter despair. Calling for hope in tragedy funneled power through ritual, and he just felt the effect firsthand. With the trick discovered, he could push Demeter toward silver soon. He meant to think that through later. For now, he was still in the underground forest, surrounded by danger. His wand still brought blood into the bottle, his eyes on the corpse. Then the bushes ahead rustled violently. He snapped his wand up, ready for the next five-legged beast, but what appeared before him were three human heads, drifting into view as if conjured from nothing. Xiaer's pupils contracted. Chapter 235, The Savior, the Weakness, and the Sword. Floating in the air before Xiaer Sprout were the heads of Harry, Hermione, and Ron. For a moment he stared in surprise, then realized the invisibility cloak. He had been puzzled earlier. Harry and his friends had fallen into the underground of the Forbidden Forest with him, yet he had sensed no trace of them. They were concealed by the Deathly Hallow. Given their current size, the cloak could easily hide all three. With the cloak of invisibility, who in the wizarding world could spot them? Hermione's voice trembled. She still sounded shaken from the sudden fall. Xiaer Sprout, we followed the charms you cast, Harry cut in. What happened? This isn't what Headmaster Dumbledore said the exam would be like. Harry's wand cast a faint lumos, and the glow revealed the corpse at Xiaer Sprout's feet. He shivered. Merlin's beard. When we first fell, something was coming, Hermione said. We put on the cloak just in time. Is this the thing that came at you? What kind of monster is this? Ron was silent, staring at the mutilated five-legged beast on the ground. The corpse had been drained dry, desiccated. Anger flared in him. He glared at Xiaer Sprout like a thief. You did this. Ron's face went dark. Before Harry and Hermione could react, Ron drew his wand with a sudden, almost animalistic motion. Stupefy! A red bolt lanced out. Ron's grin was triumphant. He had been nursing resentment toward Xiaer Sprout for some time, and now seemed desperate to see him hit the ground. But the smile froze. Xiaer Sprout had been ready. He stepped sideways and effortlessly dodged the stunning charm. Without an incantation, the wizard's hand flashed out, snatching Ron's wand and yanking him up by the throat. Ron's face blanched as his air was cut off. Harry and Hermione were stunned. What had made Ron lunge like that? Had he thought Xiaer Sprout was guilty? And did Xiaer Sprout intend to kill him? Xiaer Sprout's eyes were cold, not only toward Ron. When he looked at Harry and Hermione, a dangerous chill flickered through his gaze. Dumbledore had promised him protection for the trio, but being attacked was something else entirely. Why did you come after me? He asked. Harry and Hermione recovered themselves in a rush. Hermione's voice shook. This isn't the time for... Xiaer Sprout, put Ron down. Monsters are coming. We saw your charms and wanted to help. If we squeeze, we can barely fit one more person under the cloak, Harry stammered, indicating the invisibility shroud. Hide with us. Xiaer Sprout watched them for a long beat. He could tell when someone lied. These two were sincere. The wizard's hand loosened. Ron slumped to the ground, nearly unconscious, and his wand was flung back to Hermione. But Xiaer Sprout declined their offer to hide. I can't leave, he said. The monsters here hate me most. If I stay, others will be safer until they kill me. If I run, they'll go on a rampage. They'll hurt everyone if they can't find me. Harry and Hermione were aghast. Why would they hate you? What's really been going on? Xiaer Sprout sighed. Have you not figured it out yet, Harry? Do you still think Professor Snape wants the Philosopher's Stone? From start to finish, it was Professor Quirrell. Quirrell set this up. The revelation hit Harry like a thunderclap. Quirrell? Suddenly everything made sickening sense. The nervousness of Dumbledore and McGonagall about the exam, the jinxed broom in the Quidditch match. They had all assumed Snape was the antagonist and Quirrell the timid one protecting Harry. It was all reversed. Harry's jaw set. Then he set this trap. He used us as bait to keep Dumbledore and the others occupied, while he goes to the 4th floor to take the stone himself. Hogwarts, the magical world, if he succeeds, will be finished. I have to stop him. I'm the only one who can stop the one who must not be named from returning. Shia Sprout's expression flickered, part irritation, part reluctant appreciation. The boy was stubborn and earnest. You don't understand everything yet, Shia Sprout said, but he did not protest. He reached into his cloak and produced a small object, a port key. This will take you to Sprout Island, he explained. There's a house elf named Eugene there who can apparate you into Hogwarts. It's the only quick way for you to stop Quirrell. Harry looked between the port key and Shiar Sprout. What about you? How will you leave? As I said, Shiar Sprout replied calmly, if I leave, others will suffer. We each have our missions. You don't have much time. Harry's eyes went wet. He sensed the resolve behind Shiar Sprout's calm, that he was ready to sacrifice himself. Harry clenched his fist. He couldn't stop this here, but he could stop Quirrell. He took the port key and, without hesitation, handed the invisibility cloak he'd been wearing to Shiar Sprout. We won't need this for what's coming, but maybe it'll help you. Shiar Sprout was surprised, then smiled faintly and accepted the cloak. It would add a layer of protection. With that, magic rose from the port key. Harry and Hermione dragged a dazed Ron with them, and in a dizzying spin, they vanished from the underground forest. They looked back and left Shiar Sprout with looks full of gratitude and admiration. Shiar Sprout exhaled quietly once they were gone. Without them, he could move more freely. He didn't want to reveal strengths or methods in front of Ron, whose body still bore the influence of the temple on Doraria Island, or the others. He suspected events at the castle would still follow the broad strokes of the original story. Fate and prophecy were powerful, and Harry still had love's protection. But Shiar Sprout could not afford to be complacent. A rustle in the trees interrupted his thoughts. 3 grotesque heads rolled into view, followed by pale, twisted human limbs and dark reddish fur. 3 5-legged beasts, each a wizard transformed, stepped into his sight. Shiar Sprout's face hardened. He felt the old life-or-death focus settle in. These 3 were different from the earlier apprentice-turned 5-legged creature. These were wizards who still cast charms, only now their magic was distorted, cold, and malignant. Distorted charms streaked toward him, each enough to shatter a person where they stood. Craters opened in the earth as the spells struck. Shiar Sprout had already moved. He parried with a wand flick that was like a sword stroke. Sectum Sempra flew at one of the beasts. A wand was embedded in the pale, twisted limb of a nearby creature. It lashed out with terrifying speed and laid down warped protective magic in Sectum Sempra's path. Even so, Sectum Sempra ignored some protections and hammered into the beast, leaving a huge wound. Shiar Sprout's eyes narrowed. One of these creatures was clearly different from the others. The speed, the reflex. This was not the faded talent of a mid-level wizard. A scrap of ministry uniform with an Auror badge clung to its ragged clothing. An Auror. Lord Voldemort had turned an Auror into one of these abominations. Aurors had battlefield experience and raw power. Combined with dark transformation and enhanced magic perception, such a 5-legged beast was terrifying. Shiar Sprout thought of the missing elite Auror from the disappearance incidents and felt cold unease. If he had been changed like this, the Auror beast, irritated by the failure of its protective charm, began to unleash a storm of spells like a machine gun. Shiar Sprout dodged, the creature's 5 limbs acting like multiple wands at once. It was a nightmare to predict. He chose not to engage it directly. Instead, he went for the creature wounded by Sectum Sempra. The wizard's hand seized the wounded beast by its throat, ripping the wound open. A tearing, sickening sound filled the air as its neck gave way. Shiar Sprout fired a laser spell at the Auror beast. It grazed its face and blinded it briefly. Instinctively, it cast a protective spell, giving Shiar Sprout an opening. He murmured the rune words of ancient weather magic. Fehu, Thurisaz, Dagas, and thunder split the darkness. Lightning struck the wounded beast. Its charred body collapsed and bled into the earth. He followed with another bolt that blasted the second wounded beast into nothing. Only the Auror 5-legged beast remained. Fear and respect warred in Shiar Sprout's mind. The creature's movements were accelerating. It was adapting to its patched-together body and to the unnatural mix of magics inside it. Shiar Sprout felt pressure like he had never felt in recent training. Straight magical force alone would not finish this quickly. He would have to use legendary power or some other extreme measure. But he had another idea. He slipped on the invisibility cloak Harry had left. His figure, the hum of his magic, everything vanished from the Auror beast's perception. The five-legged beast fired blind, furious spells into the empty air. Sprout circled, watched the creature flail, then struck. His wand moved like a blade and snapped the meat-fused wand from the beast's limb. An arm tore free and fell to the ground. Over and over, hidden by the cloak, Sprout struck true until he could call down ancient weather magic again. Lightning smashed into the beast, and it finally went still. Sprout breathed, but a sharp, needle-like pain jabbed from the third eye on his forehead, his sixth sense screaming. He leapt away, and half a second later an explosion of green light struck where he had stood. Avada Kedavra. He looked up and saw another five-legged beast high in the trees, eyes cold and predatory, an elite Auror, the missing one. This was the Auror everyone had feared, the only elite who had vanished weeks earlier, now turned into a monster. Its experience and murderous cunning sent a fresh spike of apprehension through Sprout. Yet to his surprise, the elite Auror did not continue the attack. A malicious smile spread over its face, and it led the other creatures away, heading off in one direction. The pattern made Sprout sick with dread. They were moving toward the place where several groups of first years had entered the forest. They had been drawn away to force him to show himself. Now they were going to the children. Strategy. These monsters, devoid of human compassion, still used tactics. They were baiting him. Sprout's jaw tightened. He could not watch the youngsters be devoured. He hastened toward the place the others had gone, planning to use the invisibility cloak to get near and then strike hard. As he ran, he refined an idea that had been forming in his mind. The five-legged beasts relied on a delicate balance of several types of magic to remain stable. What if that balance could be disrupted? Meanwhile, the captured children had been hauled into a clearing under the elite Auror's command. The beasts had a terrifying aura. Many of the young wizards fainted outright. The rest trembled, hopeless. The captured students from other houses cowered, but the children of the local house, Guan House, reacted differently. They were not simply terrified. Some of them, like Hannah and Susan Bones, burned with something else, anger. Susan had lost her parents to Death Eaters and had been raised by an aunt. She and had known hardship. When she saw what had been done to fury lit her face. "You, what did you do to she cried. The elite Auror's eyes gleamed. It remembered Auror tactics and personality well. It would use these children to lure A disgusting five-legged beast crept toward Hannah and Susan with slobbering delight. But Hannah and Susan were not helpless. "Lumos! Ace!" they both shouted. Bright beams lanced from their wands, small, fierce laser spells that slashed at the advancing head. The other children, inspired by that courage, forced themselves to mutter incantations and fire spells too. The elite Auror watched in a mix of shock and irritation. These timid children dared to fight back. It lunged, deciding to tear them apart, to force Shire's hand. Its jaws snapped toward Susan and Hannah, but an invisible force yanked the girls aside, and a Sectum Sempra bit into the elite Auror's flank, leaving a gaping wound. The beast howled. A triumphant, savage expression spread across the elite Auror's face. The human memories that remained in its mind were right. Shiaer had come. It barked out mangled human words. "Invisibility cloak, take it off. Eat all." The five-legged beasts were becoming uncontrollable with hunger and now surged toward the remaining children. Cries and pleas filled the clearing. The children realized the beast's tactic. They were baiting Shiaer to expose himself. "Shiaer, run!" they cried. Shiaer slipped off the cloak. The elite Auror's smile widened. But Shiaer's grin was colder still. He thrust his wand forward. Smoke burst, coalescing into 7 black snakes that reared and hissed, full of cursed magic. The snake's 7 cold eyes fixed on the elite Auror. The cursed magic wormed into the creature's weave of power, and for the first time its internal balance hiccuped. It began to writhe uncontrollably. Shiaer flicked the snakes. They multiplied into dozens of smaller venomous serpents, all steeped in curses, and they sank fangs into the other five-legged beasts. One by one, each patchwork creature showed the same symptoms: magical imbalance, limbs rotting, flesh corroding and falling away. Even the hulking modifications could not wholly resist a spreading curse that interfered with the mixed magics holding them together. Only the elite Auror beast held on, drawing on its exceptional magical attainment to restore balance. It roared and charged as if to tear Ciel limb from limb. At that instant, a clear cry split the air, a phoenix cry. Fox dropped from the sky, a filthy hat clutched in its beak. The sorting hat tumbled from it, and a gleam of light shimmered within the brim. Ciel saw it at once and snatched the cold, gleaming blade that slid from the sorting hat, the sword of Gryffindor. He paused a fraction, surprised at being recognized, then decided to let the moment be what it was. He made a shallow stomp to brace himself, and with the speed of a striking predator, he closed the distance. The elite Auror could not react in time. Ciel drove the sword forward, struck, and then sheathed it in one fluid motion. Dumbledore and the others arrived at that instant to witness the scene. Behind Ciel, the hideous creature lay cleft in two. For a moment the clearing went utterly still. All eyes fell on Ciel, the first year who had beheaded a monster in a single, precise stroke. It felt like a legend come to life. Ciel was about to speak when his system panel pinged. Streams of faith power, the Demeter ritual magic, suddenly surged toward him. One thin line, golden and blinding, flooded him with more power than he had ever received before. It came from Dumbledore. On Ciel's system display, the Demeter ritual magic, which had been edging toward the silver tier, began to spike frantically. The numbers rose like a rocket. Chapter 236, Soaring, Oracle, Awakening. On the system panel, the words Demeter ritual magic flashed frantically. It hadn't quite reached platinum yet, but in the space of a single heartbeat, the silver glow spread, then a dazzling gold took over. Silver grade, gold grade. At this speed, even platinum seemed within reach. Char's heart hammered. He remembered how many trolls had lent him their power of faith before, and how little effect it had seemed to have on Demeter ritual magic. But now, the faint golden threads of faith from the deans, especially from Dumbledore, made Demeter ritual magic shoot upward like a rocket. The faith they gave me before definitely wasn't fervent, he thought. Maybe it's because the deans are far more powerful than ordinary wizards. Dumbledore, could he be nearly mythical level? No wonder the ancients prized faith so highly. Heroes in legends were repeatedly aided by gods, sometimes even carried to Olympus after death. The faith of such figures wouldn't be the same as that of ordinary people. Char's eyes gleamed with anticipation. What level would Demeter ritual magic reach? What rewards would it bring? The Demeter's blessing he'd received from the last advancement had been extraordinarily useful. Perhaps this time would be even more so. As the glow accelerated, Char felt a strange tingling along his sixth sense. Images flickered at the edge of his vision, and distant sounds brushed his ears. He shook his head, blaming nerves. He'd been tense, and the sudden surge of joy from the spell's growth was making him see things. But when he activated occlumency, the visual and auditory phenomena did not fade, they intensified. Professor Sprout, Snape, and Dumbledore, who had gathered nearby, grew alarmed at Char's head shaking. "Char! Char!" Sprout croaked, her voice raw with worry. "What's wrong? Did some dark arts hit you? Severus? Albus?" Char wanted to reassure her, to say he was fine. Before he could, a clear diamond-white light flared over Demeter ritual magic. Instantly, the anxious expression on Professor Sprout's face dimmed. The dark, underground air of the Forbidden Forest vanished from Char's senses and was replaced by another place. A pale, desolate land where death seemed to cling to the soil. In the center stood a towering, majestic, yet decaying temple. The sight reminded him of the temple on Doraria Island. Though he still didn't know how he had ended up there, his vigilance rose immediately. Occlumency stayed strong, guarding him against any seductive temptation like that island's. But the feeling that came from this temple differed from that eerie place. There was no scalp-tingling dread, no exquisite sigils on the walls promising forbidden knowledge, only faded murals, weathered by time. When Char looked closer, his brows rose. He had seen these images before. This is from the myth of Demeter, the goddess of fertility, he realized. Demeter's temple murals record her great deeds. The surviving ones look like this. So this was Demeter's temple. That would explain why his ritual magic surged. The tingling in his sixth sense made a new possibility occur to him. In old times, people with keen sixth senses, often temple priests, could receive oracles from the gods under certain solemn ritual conditions. Perhaps the rapid advancement of his ritual magic had met those conditions and allowed him to receive an oracle. It was the only explanation Char could think of. He checked reflexively for the system panel. It wasn't there. That reassured him at least. This was an illusion, like previous visions the system had given him. He wouldn't actually die here. Still, curiosity drew him forward across the dead earth toward the temple, even as doubts crowded his thoughts. This was the second mysterious temple he'd seen. Why did Demeter's temple stand in a barren wasteland? In legends, Demeter's domains were endlessly fertile, blooms year-round, fruits beyond earthly rivals. And yet here the land was cold and dead. He scooped up a handful of soil. It was colder, emptier than it looked. No warmth, no sign of life, no insects, no microorganisms. It felt like a land of death. An absurd thought flickered through his mind. It's almost like a prison for the goddess of fertility, or an instrument of torture. He shook it off. Whatever the truth, it was beyond his current level to probe. His past life had taught him that meddling with big names only brought trouble. The wiser course was to back away. He took a step back. He had just survived the most difficult first year. He wanted a peaceful few years ahead. As he retreated, the voice from his auditory hallucinations returned, this time from inside the temple, no longer distant or faint, but like a thunderclap that made the air vibrate. Char's eyes widened. It was a woman's voice, urgent and immense. Could it be a mythical being? Could Demeter be within the temple? The voice spoke again. Char flinched. The language was powerful and magical, far beyond anything like Draconic, Murmish, or even Parseltongue. He understood nothing. The speaker seemed to sense this. After a pause, she tried another tongue, and when that failed, she resorted to a simpler, more primitive language, clearly attempting backward compatibility. Char felt awkward and stammered a few halting words in ancient Hebrew. The entity inside the temple fell silent. After a long while came a weary, long sigh, so full of exhaustion that meaning crossed the language barrier without words. Char rubbed his nose uncomfortably. He said aloud. I'll memorize the language you first used. After I leave, I'll study it. If there's another chance, let's communicate again. He added, Can you let me leave now? I have family and friends waiting. If I linger, they'll be worried. Silence settled on the temple. Just as Char began to grow uneasy, a faint green light flowed out from the temple and settled on him. Startled, he soon felt vitality spread through his body. It wasn't the massive surge from his legendary life sublimation, but it was of a higher refinement, warm, like soaking in a spring, comforting as if cradled by the earth. The days of pressure condensing the World Tree Guardian and the violent struggle during the Forbidden Forest trial eased. He didn't know precisely what power this was or why it worked inside the illusion, but it felt benevolent. He softened. Thank you, he murmured. The temple's charge seemed to sense his gratitude. The low voice shifted into a high-pitched, alternately crying and laughing timbre, uttering strings of words he could not comprehend. Slowly, the strange scene, the temple and all, began to dim and dissipate. When his vision cleared, familiar surroundings returned, the Hogwarts medical ward. He lay on a bed, and the booming, incomprehensible words were gone, replaced by Professor Sprout's anxious calls. Char! Char! When his gaze met Sprout's bloodshot, haggard eyes, she broke down, almost weeping with relief. Thank goodness. Merlin be praised. It's been 3 days, 3 whole days. You're finally awake. Char realized 3 days had passed since the oracle. For those days, he must have seemed unconscious. Sprout had probably been trying to rouse him the entire time. Warmth flooded him. He reached out and wiped the tears from the corner of her eye. Sprout gripped his hand tightly, still shaken. Promise me you won't do such risky things again. Char nodded without hesitation. I promise, Auntie, I won't. Never again. He said it with conviction, except for the time he'd gone after Antonin Dolohov, but that, he told himself, wasn't really a risk. Once Sprout's relief settled into something steadier, Char asked about the others. What about the other students? Are they okay? Sprout nodded. Besides being frightened and getting some scrapes and bruises, they're all right. The worst is Harry. He took a very risky action and is still unconscious, but he's not in mortal danger. Hearing that the others were safe, Char breathed fully at last. He didn't ask about Harry, the Philosopher's Stone, or the two-faced man. The more one asked, the deeper one got entangled. It was better to leave those matters to Dumbledore and the self-styled savior. If Dumbledore had let the two-faced man get away with the stone, well, Char didn't need to voice the thought. Professor Sprout didn't press either. She didn't want to drag these memories back up. Many of the students were still shaken and haunted. For 3 days, the professors had mostly relied on memory charms to spare the students the trauma, though the panic they'd felt would take longer to work through. Fortunately, Dumbledore had promised to find an excellent specialist in memory charms and defense against the dark arts next semester, so with another year's consolidation, the incident's impact should fade. Just then, a tall figure appeared at the ward door. Dumbledore stood there, his face drawn and exhausted, but when he saw Char, he managed a faint smile. Before he could speak, Professor Sprout's expression hardened with indignation. "You still want to bring this up?" she snapped. "Don't even think about it. Get out!" Dumbledore hesitated, offered a rueful smile, and then bowed his head. "Very well," he said. "I'll wait outside." Chapter 237, Mission, Skill, Name. Dumbledore left the infirmary ward looking entirely unlike himself, diminished, almost pitiable. It was a strange sight on the face of the man who had always seemed to control every situation. Charles felt a heavy weight of desolation watching him go. He sighed inwardly. It was true that the old headmaster had always arranged people like chess pieces to shape events, but in the original timeline, he had not been without compassion. He had made Neville's 10 points the decisive factor in Gryffindor winning the House Cup in their first year. That small mercy had been crucial in giving Neville the confidence to grow. Even when arranging his own death, Dumbledore had shown pity for Draco Malfoy and had made plans to spare a child that burden. To claim he only ever used Hogwarts and its children as pawns was too cynical. This time had been different. The students had nearly suffered catastrophic losses, and that responsibility weighed on Dumbledore. Professor Sprout stood there stunned, having never seen the headmaster behave like this. After a moment, she forced back her anger. She stepped into the ward and told Charles to rest. Then she pushed the door open and left. Dumbledore leaned against the wall in the dappled light, eyes rimmed with tears. Blue eyes normally so clear and wise. She heard him apologize, voice small. "I'm sorry, Albus. What I said might have been too harsh." Dumbledore smiled bitterly and shook his head. "No, I deserved it. The pain of losing loved ones. I know it. This time, because of my foolishness, countless parents almost lost their children. I was wrong. This guilt is worse than anything a Death Eater has done. I deserve Azkaban." He sank slowly to a crouch, the anguish in his face palpable. Lines from the walls of Nurmengard, words he and his closest friend had once agreed upon in another era, flashed through his mind. For the greater good. He had told himself he had changed. He had learned from that terrible lesson. And yet now those old convictions seemed carved into his bones. He had believed, from the moment Harry was to start at Hogwarts, that the savior must be tempered. In his plan, the first year was only the beginning. Every year after would subtly subject Harry to trials, preparing him to face Voldemort. But the Forbidden Forest incident had shaken him. If not for Charles, Dumbledore thought, he might have walked into a scene of scattered limbs and death. The memory of Ariana's death flared up again, and the pain felt worse now than it had in years. All his ideas about cultivation and tempering seemed poisoned. Perhaps he was unsuited to governing the ministry, and perhaps even headmastership had given him too much opportunity to control others. Neither a Dark Lord nor a White King should exist in the magical world, he thought. If anything, the White King is worse. The thought of leaving that burden to children made him shudder. After a long moment, he steadied himself, a clumency clearing away the restless thoughts, his eyes regaining their usual sharpness. The future belonged to the students. First, though, he had a final mission to complete. He turned to Sprout. "Pomona," he said quietly, "that man refuses to speak unless he sees Charles. He cannot withstand any more legilimency or veritaserum. What he knows is too important. It concerns whether Voldemort can be destroyed outright. Can I bring him to see Charles?" Professor Sprout bristled. "He just woke up. I don't know if he's been sleeping peacefully. You want him to see the person who orchestrated all of this? Her face reddened. Dumbledore's expression was apologetic. Pomona, we now know Voldemort was not completely destroyed. When he escaped, some of my charms struck him. Even a soul or a ghost should have been annihilated, but he wasn't. He can still return. You heard his voice. He hates Charles. If Charles hadn't interfered at that crucial moment, Voldemort might have succeeded. If he truly comes back with the vengeance he would carry, that will be the real danger to Charles. I'm getting older, Pomona. I don't want to leave this menace for the children. The old herbology professor softened. The lines on Dumbledore's face were deeper than she remembered. Whatever fury she felt at his choices, she could not deny the meaning behind his words. He added gently, I will never let Charles be harmed through this process. And for the talent-enhancing potion that Pomona needs, I will do everything I can to gather the ingredients before I die. Those words took the fight out of Sprout. She took a breath and, after a pause, nodded. Dumbledore exhaled and pushed the ward door open again. While they argued, Charles, newly awake, finally had time to study his system panel. The Demeter ritual magic had caused an anomaly in his interface. He wondered what changes had occurred. The phrase Demeter ritual magic still gleamed with a diamond sheen, so the ritual hadn't been boosted to epic or legendary by Dumbledore's last thin strand of faith. That didn't surprise him. What did surprise him was a faint, mythical-level shimmer woven into the diamond light, the same kind of gleam he'd seen on his Patronus charm. A prompt appeared. Your Demeter ritual magic, influenced by mythical-level power, has undergone an unknown anomaly. Charles frowned. Mythical influence. Could that emerald light in the temple illusion have triggered a divine oracle and altered the ritual? Could the goddess Demeter really be in that temple? Had the Olympus era been shattered? Were the other Olympian gods similarly trapped? Was the temple on Doraria Island in the same state? The questions piled up, but he gave them up quickly. Speculation wouldn't help him now. He should see what tangible benefits the ritual actually granted. Under the Demeter ritual magic heading, the Blessing of Demeter appeared, an ability to bless seeds, raising their grade. The blessing's potency was limited by the damaged Demeter silver cup, but it was still a steady source of high-quality seeds. New abilities had also extended from the ritual. The most striking was the translucent, Divine Oracle of Demeter. It looked like an ability unlocked by reaching diamond grade, but it was currently on cooldown. Charles must have already triggered it. He felt a pang of regret. The diamond-level qualitative jump was far greater than previous leaps. If he understood the Oracle better, perhaps he could have received benefits he could scarcely imagine. He resolved, silently, to catch up on his studies, especially ancient and magical languages. Beyond the Divine Oracle, another derived trait had appeared. Charles' eyes widened as he read, Demeter's skill. As a priest of Demeter, you receive an increased potency in planting-related abilities. Due to mythical-level influence, the boost is greatly enhanced. Your planting-related abilities increase by 1 grade. Charles had not expected this reward. It was simple and blunt, but powerful. Planting-related abilities advanced a full grade. He glanced at his list of spells. The Soil Loosening spell and the Pruning charm, both platinum before, now radiated a clear diamond light. 2 planting-related charms had jumped straight to diamond grade. His breath caught. He had several research topics involving ancient plants, and his herbology fundamentals were shallow compared to those subjects. He'd barely managed to propagate branches of the humping willow the last time. Without Shadowthorn's help, he would have failed despite everything he knew. Now, with 2 core planting charms at diamond, his foundation would finally be strong enough for tougher cultivation tasks. And if these boosted charms reached legendary rank, perhaps, under Demeter's influence, they could even reach toward mythical levels. The possibilities made his chest tighten. Even without fully understanding the Divine Oracle, Demeter's skill alone was a massive gain. Farming felt suddenly attainable again. The crisis with the two-faced man seemed resolved. Charles could taste the carefree farming days he'd been forced to delay. He felt an itch to return to the greenhouses, to loosen soil and plant seed after seed. Those thoughts evaporated when Dumbledore pushed the ward door open. Charles' excitement faded. Duty called again. The headmaster had come for him. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Dumbledore came to the point. "Charles," he said, "there's something I absolutely must ask of you. There's a man whose time is nearly up. He will only speak on matters of the utmost importance if he can meet you." Charles blinked. "Who?" Dumbledore gave the name that made Charles' heart skip. Quirinus Quirrell. Chapter 238, Conditions, Lone Eagle, Legacy. When Dumbledore said the name Quirinus Quirrell, Charles' eyes went oddly still. In the original story, Quirrell had died the moment he touched Harry, the protective magic on the boy's body, destroying him before he could use almost any of his power. Voldemort had fled, and yet now Quirrell was alive. The transformation Voldemort had performed on him must have been extraordinarily potent. Even so, why did he want to see Quirrell in particular? Thoughts flickered through Charles' mind. He shook his head at the headmaster. "Professor," he said, "I don't want to see him." What good would meeting Quirrell do? To gloat over a fallen enemy? Charles had no taste for that. There was also risk. What if Quirrell had learned dark spells from Voldemort, spells that could endanger everyone present? What if he decided to die spectacularly in front of Dumbledore? History held worse possibilities. It was conceivable, even if unlikely, that Quirrell could bring about a catastrophe. Charles wasn't willing to take even a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying like that. The only sensible choice was to refuse. Dumbledore did not look surprised. In the few times they'd met, this young wizard had displayed a calmness and prudence far beyond his years, qualities that had played a part in the way he'd turned the tide in the Forbidden Forest. Dumbledore did not press him. Instead, he offered reassurance in the only way that might carry weight. "Don't worry," Dumbledore said. "I can swear he will not be able to perform any magic. I will guarantee your safety the whole time." And, his tone grew solemn, his clear blue eyes fixed on Charles, "I will grant you 3 wishes. So long as they do not contradict my principles, I will do my best to fulfill them." Charles' gaze flickered. A promise like that from the wizard nearest the mythical level of power was no small thing. Dumbledore's influence and connections in the magical world made such a pledge incredibly weighty, enough to sway even an alchemist of Nicholas Flamel's standing. With Dumbledore vouching for his safety and offering 3 favors, a meeting with Quirrell could be acceptable. Charles nodded. Dumbledore released a relieved breath and hurried Charles out of the medical wing. They threaded the castle corridors, and at a stairwell, Dumbledore waved his wand. A staircase Charles had never seen before slid into place and carried them deeper into the heart of Hogwarts. Charles' surprise showed on his face. Dumbledore smiled gently. "The secrets of Hogwarts are not only what you students stumble across," he said. 1,000 years ago, the 4 founders raised this place in a dark and bloody time. They meant Hogwarts to shelter little wizards and to leave a spark for the magical world. They also prepared for desperate battles in case Hogwarts itself was found. At that time, Hogwarts was not only a school, but a fortress. Many of those war spells have faded over the centuries, but some things remain. Only a truly succeeding headmaster may access them. The staircase carried them far below the level of the potions classroom. The air grew heavy, a tense, murderous aura lingered, as if centuries-old defenses remembered their purpose. Charles noted with unease that his system panel, every magic-related ability he could see, was dimmer than before, as if suppressed by some force. Dumbledore pointed out the reason at once. "We are going to the prison cell used 1,000 years ago to hold spies. The 4 founders left powerful enchantments there that can prevent a confined being from casting any magic or magic-like powers. Even Azkaban is not as secure as that cell." Charles narrowed his eyes. He knew Hogwarts kept detention rooms. Filch had boasted of that, and he was not surprised that a fortified prison existed. What startled him was Dumbledore's hint that 1,000 years ago there might have been conspirators who could infiltrate Hogwarts and cast magic from within. "Professor," he asked, "wasn't Hogwarts created to keep young wizards safe from Muggle witch hunts? The enemies then would have been Muggles. How could they infiltrate as spies?" Dumbledore shook his head slowly. "The enemies of wizards have never been only Muggles. If the danger had been only Muggles, confounding charms or simple protections would have been enough. Or more extreme measures, control of a king by Imperius, might have sufficed." The four founders chose to build a castle for reasons greater than avoiding mere human persecution. There were wizards who defected or betrayed their kind, of course, but those were small matters compared to what the founders feared. The true enemy they feared is not recorded. History left no clues. Even I, his voice grew distant, have no way of knowing. Charles felt a chill. Madame Hufflepuff's will had warned him of the dangers of exposing the Statute of Secrecy. If the wrong forces waited hidden from history, the magical world could still be at risk. But there was no time to dwell. Dumbledore led him down a narrow torchlit corridor to a heavy door of some unknown metal. Someone was coming out as the door opened. Greasy hair, black robes, and an atmosphere of gloom, Severus Snape. From the crack of the door came a strong, acrid potion smell, and under that, a sickening odor like rotting meat. Dumbledore looked to Snape. Snape shook his head. "That man was tampered with during the transformation," he said. "His magic has been altered. It's stronger in some ways, but as a cost, he would have lived only 2 or 3 months at most, even without the injuries. He was never intended to truly survive. Potions are keeping him alive now, but he could die any moment. If you have questions, ask them quickly." Dumbledore's face showed sorrow. Quirinus Quirrell was a true genius. He might have had a brilliant future, but he made the wrong choice. He associated with the Dark Lord. Even if he gained power, the price ordinary people pay was unimaginable. Snape's hands clenched. He looked grim. Dumbledore realized his own words sounded foolish and awkward and led Charles into the prison cell. What they saw there made Charles' pupils shrink. Quirrell lay chained by iron, his body a mud-like, swollen thing that reeked of decay. A maze of tubes pumped potions into him. Without them, Charles had no doubt the man would be dead. The only recognizably human feature was his face. At the sound of Dumbledore and Charles entering, Quirrell forced his head up. Some of the monstrous effects Voldemort had left on him seemed to have ebbed at last. The rational shine of Ravenclaw genius returned briefly to his eyes. He looked at Charles, his voice a faint rasp. "I never expected it," he said. "Such a carefully laid plan ruined by a young wizard of such poor talent as you. You guessed early that something was wrong with me, didn't you?" Charles said nothing. He did not gloat or mock. He stood behind Dumbledore, wand in hand, alert in case Quirrell made a last-ditch, desperate attack. Quirrell gave a soft, bitter laugh. "How cautious!" Then he croaked. "Bound by these chains, and in my condition, let alone my present state, I can't cast a spell. Even if I were well, with Dumbledore by your side, I doubt anyone could harm you here." Charles remained unmoved. Dumbledore's expression turned to one of grave appreciation and then to business. "Quirrell," he said, "you asked to see this young wizard. Tell us everything you know. Perhaps that will atone somewhat for your crimes." Quirrell's smile changed. He was no longer the obsequious mask he had worn before. He tried to elevate his chin, and with pride clinging to his words, said, "No, I'm not here to atone. I'm here to prove one thing. I did not lose completely to the Dark Lord. He could take my life, he has, but I glimpsed his secrets." He began coughing violently. Dumbledore feared the fit would end his life. Between hacks, Quirrell managed, "His darkness exceeds your imagination. Dumbledore, I have never seen such a fragmented soul. I think only one kind of magic can ravage a soul that way, and you know what it is." Dumbledore fell quiet, pondering. The suspicion he had long held seemed to harden. Charles heard him mutter, "So it is true. Horcrux." Then, softer, "I don't know how many he made." Charles, who already understood the meaning of the word, felt no outward turbulence. How to confront Voldemort's Horcruxes was Dumbledore's burden. Charles was only a first year who wanted to plant trees in peace. Let the task of hunting Horcruxes fall to others. He did not wish to be involved. Quirrell's interest shifted away from the big, dark revelations and toward Charles himself. He asked, "You told me you read my paper on trolls. Was that true? Did you agree with my hypothesis?" His eyes grew brighter, fanatical. "When I set things up in the Forbidden Forest, I planned to control some trolls. These thick-skinned brutes are troublesome in numbers. But I found no trolls left in the Forbidden Forest. There were traces, sacrificial marks. Is that connected to you?" Quirrell's tone took on the fever of a man who thought he'd discovered confirmation of a treasured theory. "You are the giant priest. I was not wrong, was I? A giant priest capable of magic really exists." Charles remained silent, but a flicker of admiration crossed his face. Quirrell had largely missed the full truth, but had been close. To deduce the presence of a giant priest among the troll settlements in the Forbidden Forest from such fragments showed a clever mind. Quirrell, thrilled, laughed aloud. "Ha ha! I knew it! Those fools who mocked me lacked foresight. I was right." Dumbledore's face darkened with regret. "Quirrell, you had a chance to verify your discovery, to make your name in the magical world, to gain a place in the history of magic. All that was destroyed by your choices. You will be nailed to the pillar of shame and reviled for what you've done." Quirrell's laughter faded into self-mockery. "Yes. Looking back, I threw away a winning hand. This year at Hogwarts has been a clown show, used by the Dark Lord as a pawn and by you, Dumbledore, as a whetstone against the so-called savior. How many months did I pretend to stutter? I can't even remember. Playing the fool, eating garlic daily, I've had enough." His eyes flashed. "And now—" He paused, pride flaring as if he still had power to spend. "I have no regrets. I am Quirinus Quirrell, the most talented Ravenclaw in decades. If I fall, I will fall with a bang. I will not end as a stuttering coward." He laughed, free and hollow. Life was seeping from him with each breath. Dumbledore's voice cut coldly through the cell. "Quirrell, your arrogance led to your downfall. But you cannot die yet. You must stand trial before the Wizengamot and answer for your crimes." Quirrell sneered. "Trial? Punishment? Drag this weak body into the Wizengamot. Let sanctimonious incompetence pick me apart? I can already see their nauseating faces. No one in this world has the right to judge me." Dumbledore moved, wand raised to stop him, but it was too late. Unable to use magic, but still capable of desperate action, Quirrell gathered the last of his failing strength. He tore free one of the tubes feeding him potions, and head held high, slammed it against the stone wall. Like a battered lone eagle smashing against a cliff, with that sound his last flicker of life blew out. Dumbledore stood motionless for a long moment, then whispered, "Quirrell, why go to such lengths?" Seeing Charles' vacant look, Dumbledore's expression shifted from sorrow to protectiveness. He stepped close and gently covered Charles' eyes. "Child," he said, "don't look at this. It's not something you should see. Come, let us go back. Sleep. Have a warm cup of tea in the common room. It is over." Yet the thing that left Charles dazed was not the blood and ruin in front of him. As Quirrell's attention had flickered to him in that last moment, a faint mental impression surged into his mind. The echo of a mental technique Quirrell had once practiced, what Quirrell called the troll communication charm. Charles had prepared to seal it away with the great mind-sealing art, but the impression was not a possession or a curse. It carried words, an unfinished thought. Quirrell's voice, faint and strewn with his last breath, reached into Charles' head. "Consider this my gift to you," the voice said. "Think of it as repayment for helping me verify the giant priest hypothesis. Finally," the voice thinned, "be careful. That person." And then it was gone. Chapter 239, Threat, Peter Pettigrew, Sublimation Harvest. As Quirinus Quirrell's faint mental impression still echoed in his head, Char's expression froze. The unfinished thesis Quirrell had left behind bore a shocking title: Feasibility Study on the Atavistic Return of Trolls to the Titan Giant Bloodline. Beyond that title, the basic theoretical framework was mostly in place. Only many key details were missing. It was clearly a follow-up to Quirrell's unpublished giant priest thesis. The idea of coaxing trolls back toward their Titan giant ancestry, or at least increasing the concentration of Titan giant blood among them, was audacious. Char could only admire the man's scholarly genius. If Quirrell had not crossed paths with Lord Voldemort, he might have become one of the great scholars in the history of magic. What a pity. Regret and lamentation passed quickly. Char's attention shifted to the warning Quirrell had left at the end. "Be careful. That person?" A peculiar look appeared in Char's eyes. It wasn't that Quirrell had deliberately left a riddle, it was simply that his mental traces had faded too quickly. The troll communication charm could be used on weak-minded creatures like trolls, and Quirrell had used that magic to speak with Char, away from Dumbledore's notice. Even when Quirrell was intact, he would have had to bear enormous strain and could not have sustained it long. In his dying state, it had faded before he could name the person. The last whisper of Quirrell had vanished, leaving only a mystery behind. Who had Quirrell been warning him about? 100 possibilities flickered through Char's mind. The most obvious was Voldemort, yet according to Dumbledore, Voldemort's soul had fled Hogwarts. During that escape, Dumbledore had used spells that could even destroy a soul. Although Horcruxes prevented complete annihilation, Voldemort should have lost most of his power. As in the story, he ought to lie dormant in the shadows until some servant found a way to restore him. In those years, he should have been too weak to threaten the wizarding world. But if Quirrell's warning meant Voldemort could still pose a threat to Hogwarts, then perhaps Voldemort was feigning weakness. Maybe the black smoke that escaped had not been his true soul. Perhaps a portion had been left behind at Hogwarts, lingering like the phrase, "The darkest place is under the lamp." Voldemort's research into souls was unparalleled. He might have laid a cunning trap that even Dumbledore missed. Or during preparations for the Forbidden Forest trial, Voldemort might have left backups, a potion to restore power quickly, or some other contingency. Quirrell's warning could also have referred to someone else. Harry Potter's psychic connection to Voldemort was dangerous prior to occlumency training. In canon, that link allowed Voldemort to transmit false information and even attempt to possess Harry during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. If Harry's mental defenses were weak now, possession could be possible. Ron Weasley was another candidate. Since his encounter with the Temple, his behavior had grown more sinister. Quirrell himself had undergone five-legged beast modification and had ties to the Doraria Island Temple. If he sensed something off about Ron, warning would make sense. Char didn't resolve the mystery. For the moment, he put it aside. Whatever Quirrell meant, whatever danger it implied, nothing would dare act brazenly inside Hogwarts while Dumbledore's wards and vigilance held. Dumbledore had been pushed nearly to the limit. The very fact that he used multiple soul-threatening charms when Voldemort escaped showed how provoked he had been. Even if Dumbledore could not kill Voldemort outright, he wanted to make him hurt. Any demon bold enough to strike Hogwarts now would be either a fool or supremely brave. Char decided not to dwell on it. There were rarer, more practical things to do with his time. He went to the little greenhouse. He wasn't fleeing from the bloodshed, despite Dumbledore's offer to send him back to Hufflepuff. Tea would not fix his emotions. Planting would. Looking at the greenhouse again cleared his head. Quirrell's warning no longer occupied him. If it remained unsolved, so be it. He'd act only on what he could control. Inside the greenhouse, a deep blue glow like the ocean drew his gaze. Clusters of dark blue blood emeralds swayed beneath it, and above them hung reward orbs, bright, plump spheres that seemed to echo the sound of deep-sea waves. Char recognized them at once, the blood emeralds infused with North Sea Kraken blood, almost mature. Blending three kinds of magical creature blood with the North Sea Kraken, an entity far beyond 5x strength, meant the rewards would be superior to anything he had seen. The projected rewards were formidable: platinum-grade limb regeneration, gold-grade smoke spewing, and silver-grade vortex, all Kraken-related. The first two would greatly enhance Char's survivability. The vortex recalled the colossal whirlpool summoned by ancient magic during his fight with the Kraken at the bottom of the sea. That vortex had been extraordinary. If Char could obtain an area of effectability like that, even confined to water, stacked high enough, his imitation might rival or surpass the Kraken's. An idea crept into his mind. His blood had proven extremely helpful for blood emeralds to advance their growth stages before. Back then, only legendary life had been sublimated once. Legendary power had not yet been sublimated. Each sublimation of a legendary ability slightly raised his life level. Now, with legendary power already sublimated once, the effect of his blood might be stronger. He also recalled the legendary power sublimation characteristic, Indomitable Force, which raised his power when he approached the limit, the level after the second sublimation. He had felt its power before. In sheer brute force, few creatures in the wizarding world could compete with him in that state, perhaps only ancient beings like the Kraken. If he used blood from that elevated state to nourish the nearly mature blood emeralds, what would happen? Perhaps the reward level would increase. Originally, the best orb here was platinum. Even harvesting all of them might only bring him to the edge between platinum and diamond. But a slight boost could push one of the rewards into diamond. And Char remembered the five-legged modified aurors he had seen in the Forbidden Forest, how a single modified auror could outmatch him in pure magic. He had already drawn Voldemort's ire. If Voldemort ever had a chance, he would not hesitate to kill him. Char had to seize every opportunity to improve himself. He made his decision. Drawing a breath, Char swung his wand. Sectum Sempra, he cast it on himself. The blade-like curse sliced through his flesh. Pain flared, blood sprayed. But his face did not change. This wound, fatal for an ordinary person, felt like a scratch to him. Not enough. He kept going, hands steady, casting again and again. Half an hour passed. It looked as if he had been methodically carved. White bone showed beneath torn skin across his body. Still not at his limit, he persisted. He practiced occlumency to keep his mind steady and continued the self-inflicted cruelty. After another half hour, blurred vision began to crowd in at the edges. His life force, strained by the torrents of blood loss, could no longer sustain the wounds without consequence. But with the edge came a surge, a violent, intoxicating rise. For a fleeting moment, he reached the state of the second sublimation of legendary power. He had felt this omnipotent rush before. He did not squander it. With what blood remained in his depleted veins, he forced forth a plume of blood mist and bathed the dark blue blood emeralds in it. The mist carried a majesty that felt almost supernatural, as if it were passing beyond the mundane world. The droplets sank into the gems, and Char watched through blurred eyes as the reward orbs above began to throb violently. Then each orb swelled outward in a ring. And gold-grade vortex. Char exhaled, and a smile tugged at his lips despite the pain. He raised a hand and reached out. The orbs surged toward him, eager to be claimed. As reward light orbs poured in one after another, Charles felt as if the roar of the deep sea filled his ears. The North Sea Kraken's blood, amplified by the other two magical creature bloodlines, began to surge within him. Notifications scrolled across the system panel. The limb regeneration ability flashed, and a clear diamond light spread through its aura. A fierce itch erupted from every wound on his body. Narrowing his eyes, Charles looked down and stared in astonishment. The deep, bone-bearing gashes were filling with granulation tissue at an incredible rate. Moments ago, he'd looked like he'd been slowly carved alive. Now most of the grotesque wounds were gone. Even the shallower gashes had almost entirely closed. Apart from faint traces, it was impossible to tell how badly he had been injured before. The speed of recovery stunned him. This was before the reward orb had even been fully assimilated and before limb regeneration had reached full diamond grade. Its effect far exceeded his expectations. A thought formed in his mind. His legendary life ability had already undergone one sublimation. That excess life force must be enhancing regeneration. Even at the same ability rank, a richer life force accelerates recovery. His legendary life had already elevated his baseline. That explained why the effect was stronger than he'd predicted. If Diamond Grade was already this powerful now, what would happen after another promotion? The diamond glow on the system panel intensified. As the reward light orb's power continued to infuse him, the last trace of platinum was replaced by the crystalline sheen of Diamond Grade. Limb regeneration, Diamond Grade, promoted. Charles felt the blood and flesh inside him stir with renewed vigor. The legendary radiance of his legendary life brightened a little in response. This feedback suggested limb regeneration might serve as another piece in legendary life's future sublimation, pushing his life trait toward a new characteristic. He allowed himself a small, bittersweet smile. The pain he'd endured had been worth it, though the next sublimation was still far off. He decided to test the diamond grade effect. To be safe, he started with a toe. Sectum Sempra flashed from his wand, and blood spurted as the toe was severed and dropped to the floor. Within less than a second, warm life force flowed toward the stump. Flesh writhed and reformed. A perfect toe grew back, identical to the original. Charles' eyes lit up. The regeneration was even better than he had hoped. Emboldened, he severed his leg at the knee. It took only a few seconds longer than the toe, and a new calf had formed. He continued like some obsessive experimenter, testing hands, feet, tongues, even eyes, and then internal organs, spleen, lungs, intestines, stomach. The results made his pulse race. Injuries that would have been fatal, or at least permanently crippling for ordinary people, mended as casually as hair growth. Extremities healed fastest. An arm severed at the shoulder could regenerate in about 5 seconds with no awkwardness or stiffness. Noses and tongues were similar. Precise organs like eyes took longer, roughly a minute to regrow. Internal organs were slower still, usually around 30 seconds. He didn't dare touch the brain. Even with diamond limb regeneration and legendary life, the brain seemed beyond feasible regeneration for now. The heart, he reasoned, could likely regenerate if not totally annihilated, but it would take significantly longer. Clenching his fist, Charles felt like the trolls from fantasy stories. Vital spots were barely a risk on him anymore. And this was only diamond grade. If limb regeneration ascended to epic or legendary, perhaps even a single drop of blood could spawn a whole body. He felt exhilarated. That exhilaration, however, was short-lived. A heavy fatigue washed over him. Every limb and tendon weighted as though packed with lead. He'd overtaxed himself by forcing so many regenerations in rapid succession. Even legendary life had limits. Multiple, rapid regrowths consumed physical strength and dragged his mind into wariness. He rested until the fatigue ebbed, understanding this drawback but deeming it trivial compared to the power he'd gained. Charles turned his attention back to the system. Alongside limb regeneration's promotion, smoke emission had advanced to platinum grade and shimmered on the verge of diamond, its strength far beyond average platinum. He remembered the Kraken's tale. When it had faced Miss Hufflepuff, it escaped capture and a gruesome fate at Hogwarts with this very trick. Miss Hufflepuff, with a Patronus spanning 1,000 years, must have been legendary in talent. That the Kraken could flee her showed the ability's unique usefulness. A tickle in his throat reminded him of the dragon firepower he'd once gained from a blood emerald. Something felt like it was growing. The itch intensified. Charles coughed, and a cloud of black smoke blasted from his mouth, instantly swallowing the area in inky darkness. The platinum night vision ability couldn't pierce it. More importantly, he realized the smoke disrupted magical perception. Inside the cloud, his own magical senses were unaffected, but other wizards' magical perception was heavily obscured. Since powerful wizards rely less on sight and more on magical awareness, even a single, well-timed puff that blinds perception could leave them disoriented. No wonder the Kraken had escaped Miss Hufflepuff. The smoke granted both an avenue of retreat and a battlefield advantage, concealment from magical senses. He thought back to his fight with the 5-legged Auror beast. If he had had this ability, then the creature's heightened magical perception might have been thrown off guard, perhaps giving him the opening he needed. The smoke wasn't as absolute as the Deathly Hallows invisibility cloak, but it was a native ability he could grow into. Charles made a mental note, develop tactical applications. Finally, he tested the Vortex ability, which had also reached platinum grade. Its sheen was duller, far from the faint diamond shimmer of smoke emission. He slipped his hand into the water tank in the little greenhouse and felt as if he could summon tempests. The surface erupted, water spun, surged, and condensed into a violent vortex. The magically reinforced tank groaned under the strain, the glass walls creaking and warping as the whirlpool bared down. The vortex couldn't match the single-target lethality of his ancient weather magic, sectum spells, or even the laser spell, but for area control in water, it was unrivaled. On land, it was useless without water, but it had potential. Overall, the Blood Emerald harvest had been a windfall. Beyond immediate ability upgrades, he pulled out a large bottle containing the 5-legged beast's blood he'd collected in the Forbidden Forest trial. His eyes gleamed. That blood would let him cultivate a big batch of mutant mandrake glow fungus, translating, in turn, into far more ancient ash than he'd ever had before. With quantities like that, his ancient plant research would leap forward, and siphoning off some of the temple's power on Doraria Island by cultivating those fungi would weaken that adversary while strengthening himself. A 2-for-1. But the trial had cost him. The system showed Serpensortia, originally temporarily elevated to diamond grade by the cursed jewelry, had slid back to the knife edge between platinum and diamond. When he'd used cursed magic against the five-legged beast, its innate magic clashed with the jewelry's curses. The beast's magic collapsed, and the cursed jewelry on him nearly disintegrated. Even ocean heart-level cursed trinkets had been pulverized. He could only be thankful he'd paid that price instead of losing lives among the little wizards. The loss of cursed jewelry stung, but it was not irreparable. He'd been immersing himself in curses for some time. That experience kept Serpensortia afloat. Give him time, and with his platinum-level proficiency in curse studies, he was confident he could push it back to diamond. A faint, pleading voice tugged his attention. "Save. I don't want to disappear yet." He turned. It was the voodoo doll he'd been exploiting. All the other cursed items were destroyed. This doll now lay half annihilated, its grotesque head the only part still whining. He'd expected less from it. By any measure, it wasn't the most potent cursed object among the lot, yet it had survived. Why? Had its craftsmanship, made by the two-faced man, rendered it sturdier? Or during his previous exploitation, had the doll absorbed curses from the other jewelry and undergone a peculiar transformation? The odd survival piqued Charles' curiosity. Voodoo was a dark and strange branch of magic. He'd studied curses long enough to know the original intent of voodoo doll rituals was to summon vengeful spirits from the sticks and unleash vicious, powerful curses. The most potent medium for such rituals wasn't cloth or paper, it was flesh and blood. The richer and closer to the caster the blood and flesh, the more power the curse could draw. The problem, of course, was the price. A flesh and blood voodoo doll demanded continual feeding. Its hunger grew day by day, and compelled to be sated with the creator's own flesh until the caster became a skeleton. Even the most fanatical dark wizards wouldn't willingly choose such self-consuming suicide. Hence, cloth and paper became the standard. That drawback didn't frighten Charles. He had severed limbs, eyes, and organs, literal pieces of himself, lying around from his regeneration tests. For a voodoo doll made to feed on flesh and blood, his offerings would last a very long time. He imagined the possibilities. A voodoo doll fueled by legendary life. What level of curse intensity would that reach? He licked his lips. Without wasting a second, he gathered the scattered organs and flesh and shoved them into the voodoo doll's gaping mouth. The doll whimpered, then went very still.